3 gunshots shattered the night, and Selena Vale's entire world split in two, before and after. The man bleeding out on rain-soaked pavement wasn't supposed to matter. He was a criminal, a monster wrapped in expensive suits, the heir to an empire built on violence and fear. But somewhere between restoring broken paintings and falling for broken men, she'd committed the fatal mistake every smart woman knows to avoid. She'd looked back at Lucian Moretti and let herself believe he could be saved. Now his blood was staining her hands, and walking away was no longer an option. If you want to know how a museum encounter with a dangerous billionaire turned into a fight for survival, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Manhattan Museum of Antiquities smelled like old money and older secrets. Selena Vale stood in the far corner of the grand hall, champagne flute sweating in her palm, watching donors circulate like well-dressed sharks. She hated these events, hated the false smiles, the performative charity, the way wealthy collectors appraised art like livestock at auction. But the museum paid her bills, so here she stood in a borrowed black dress that cost more than her monthly rent, pretending she belonged. "You've been avoiding the Caravaggio exhibit all night." The voice came from directly behind her, low, precise, with an edge that made her spine straighten involuntarily. She didn't turn around, didn't need to. She'd felt his presence the moment he entered the building 2 hours ago, a disturbance in the carefully maintained atmosphere of cultivated elegance. Lucian Moretti. "I've seen it already," Selena said, keeping her eyes fixed on the Baroque painting across the room. "I restored it last spring." "I know. I read the conservation report." That made her turn. He was taller than she'd expected, standing close enough that she caught the scent of something expensive and vaguely predatory. Sandalwood, maybe, mixed with the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. His tuxedo fit like it had been constructed around him, charcoal fabric stretched across shoulders that suggested he did more than sign checks and attend galas. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Storm gray, intelligent, and currently fixed on her face with an intensity that felt almost physical. "That's unsettling," she said flatly. "Reading conservation reports? Knowing who wrote them?" His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I know everything about you, Miss Vale, every painting you've restored, every damaged masterpiece you've brought back from the edge of permanent loss. The Vermeer in Boston, the Rembrandt in Philadelphia, that impossible reconstruction you did on the fire-damaged Botticelli last year that made the Times." Selena's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. "Congratulations on having internet access. I'm not trying to impress you." "Then what are you trying to do?" "Talk to you. For 5 minutes. Without you looking at me like I'm something that crawled out from under a rock." "I don't know you well enough to have an opinion about what kind of rock you crawled out from under." This time he did smile, and it transformed his face completely. Suddenly he looked younger, more human, less like the man whose name appeared in Forbes articles about empire building and FBI investigations about things that never quite stuck. "Lucian Moretti," he said, extending a hand. She didn't take it. "I know who you are." "Then you know I collect art." "I know you collect a lot of things. Art is probably the least interesting item on that list." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or respect? He lowered his hand slowly. Around them, the gala continued its elegant dance. String quartet music drifted from the main hall. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on entire meals. "You're afraid of me," Lucian said quietly. "I'm cautious around men who make headlines in both Fortune magazine and federal indictments." "I've never been indicted." "The word is yet." He studied her face like she was a painting he was trying to authenticate. "If you ignore me again after tonight, I'll buy this entire museum just to make sure you have to speak to me." Selena blinked. "Excuse me?" "The museum. I'll buy it. The board has been looking for a major donor to fund the new wing. I'll write the check tomorrow, install myself on the selection committee for restoration projects, and then every damaged painting in their collection will cross your desk with a personal note from me attached." "That's insane. That's honesty." He stepped closer, and she caught the full force of whatever magnetism he carried. "I've been watching you for months, Miss Vale. Not in some predatory stalker way. I'm not a lunatic, but I come to this museum often. I've seen you work. I've watched you examine paintings like they're worth saving. Like bringing something broken back to beauty actually matters. It does matter.
I know. That's why I'm standing here making a fool of myself instead of doing what I usually do at these events, which is write a check and leave before dessert. Selena's heart was doing something erratic and unwelcome inside her chest. This was a mistake. Every instinct she possessed was screaming at her to walk away, to put distance between herself and this man whose eyes saw too much and whose proximity felt like standing too close to an open flame. 5 minutes, she heard herself say.
His expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or victory. 5 minutes. They moved away from the main gallery, deeper into the museum's warren of smaller exhibition rooms. Lucien walked beside her with the kind of fluid grace that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin in a way that had nothing to do with the expensive suit. He stopped in front of a Renaissance painting, Madonna and Child, oils on wood panel, colors still vibrant despite 4 centuries of existence. This one, he said. Tell me about this one. Selena studied the painting, letting her professional instincts override the chaos in her nervous system. Florentine school, probably early 1500s. The pigments suggest it was created before the widespread use of smalt for blue tones. See how the Virgin's robes have that deep lapis lazuli quality? That was expensive even then. Whoever commissioned this had money. But? She glanced at him. How do you know there's a but? Because you're frowning slightly, like something bothers you. He was observant, dangerously so. Selena looked back at the painting. The Madonna's hands. See how the fingers are slightly elongated, almost mannered? That's not typical of the Florentine style from this period. It suggests either a later addition by a different artist or someone trained in the Venetian tradition trying to work in a Florentine style. You can see all that just by looking? I've spent 15 years learning to see what's underneath the surface. The lies paintings tell. The places where time and restoration have changed the original artist's intention. Lucien was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, lower, more intimate. What do you see when you look at people? That's not my area of expertise. Try. She should have deflected, should have made some light comment and steered the conversation back to safe territory. Instead, she found herself turning to face him fully, really looking at him for the first time since he'd approached her. I see someone who's tired, she said slowly. Someone who's very good at wearing the right mask for the right occasion. Someone who probably hasn't had a genuine conversation in longer than they'd care to admit. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's uncomfortably accurate. You asked. I did. He moved closer, and suddenly the museum's carefully controlled climate felt insufficient. The air between them seemed charged with something Selena couldn't name and didn't want to acknowledge. Can I ask you something else? You're going to regardless. Do you believe people can change? Genuinely transform into something better than they were designed to be? The question caught her off guard. This wasn't flirtation anymore. This was something rawer, more desperate. She saw it in the way he held himself, the way his fingers had curled slightly at his sides like he was bracing for impact. I believe damaged things can be restored, Selena said carefully. But restoration isn't about erasing what happened. It's about stabilizing the damage and preserving what's authentic underneath. Even if what's authentic is broken? Especially then. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the armor. A glimpse of whatever lived beneath the cultivated persona of Lucien Moretti, billionaire collector and heir to nightmares. Then her colleague's voice shattered the moment. Selena, there you are. Marcus Webb materialized beside them, slightly breathless, his bow tie askew. He was the museum's senior curator, a kind man in his 60s who'd mentored Selena since she started working there. Right now, he looked deeply uncomfortable. Marcus, she said, relieved for the interruption and annoyed by it in equal measure. Is something wrong? I need to borrow you. Museum business. Won't take long. He glanced at Lucien with barely concealed wariness. Mr. Moretti. Mr. Webb. Lucien's voice had gone cool, professional. The man who'd asked her about redemption had disappeared behind expensive tailoring and practiced distance. Marcus practically dragged her into an adjacent gallery. The moment they were out of earshot, he gripped her arm with surprising strength. What the hell are you doing? Selena pulled free. Having a conversation, is that illegal now?
With Lucian Moretti? Yes, actually, it might be. Marcus looked genuinely frightened. Selena, do you have any idea who that man is? A collector. A donor. Someone who clearly appreciates art. He's the acting head of the Moretti crime family. The words hit like cold water. Selena went very still. What? His father died 2 years ago. Lucien inherited the entire operation. Money laundering, racketeering, connections to organized crime throughout the East Coast. The FBI has been investigating the family for decades, but nothing sticks because the Morettis are very good at making problems disappear. Marcus's face was pale. He's dangerous, Selena. The kind of dangerous that doesn't announce itself until it's too late. Selena's mouth had gone dry. He was just talking to me about art restoration. I don't care if he was reciting poetry. You need to stay away from him. I've seen what happens to people who get tangled up with families like his. It doesn't end well. She wanted to argue, wanted to point out that Lucien had seemed almost vulnerable, that the questions he'd asked suggested someone struggling with precisely the legacy Marcus was describing. But she also wasn't an idiot. The warning in Marcus's eyes was real, and he had no reason to lie. Okay, she said quietly. I'll keep my distance. Marcus relaxed slightly. Good. Smart. Now let's get back to the gala before someone notices we've both disappeared. They returned to the main hall where the event was beginning to wind down. Donors were collecting coats, exchanging final pleasantries, making plans for lunch dates and theater tickets. Selena searched for Lucien in the crowd, but he'd vanished, leaving only the ghost of sandalwood and that unsettling intensity. She told herself it was better this way, safer. Whatever had sparked between them in that quiet gallery was dangerous. Marcus was right about that much. Men like Lucien Moretti didn't have normal relationships with normal women who restored paintings for museums. She went home to her cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, stripped off the borrowed dress, and tried very hard not to think about storm gray eyes asking if broken things could be saved. She failed. For 3 days, Selena threw herself into work with manic focus. She had a 17th century landscape on her restoration table. Dutch school, badly damaged by improper storage. The varnish layer yellowed and cracked. Normally, she loved this kind of challenge. The careful removal of degraded materials, the slow revelation of original colors hidden beneath centuries of accumulated grime. But her hands kept shaking. She couldn't stop thinking about the gala, about Lucien's question, about the way he'd looked at the Madonna painting like he was searching for something he'd lost, about the fact that Marcus had called him the head of a crime family, and she'd felt drawn to him anyway. On the 4th morning, a courier arrived at the museum's restoration lab. Selena looked up from her workbench as the security guard escorted a man in a crisp uniform into her space. He carried a large flat package wrapped in archival materials and protective padding. "Delivery for Selena Vale," he said. "Signature required." She signed the electronic pad, barely paying attention. Probably another piece from the museum's collection needing assessment. But when the courier left and she carefully unwrapped the package, her breath stopped. It was a painting. Renaissance-era, oils on canvas, roughly 2 feet by 3 feet. The subject was a young woman in profile, her face turned toward a window where light spilled across delicate features. The composition was stunning, classical, elegant, the kind of work that belonged in a major museum collection. It was also severely damaged. The canvas had tears along the upper left quadrant. The paint layer was lifting in several places, threatening to flake away entirely. Water damage had created dark stains across the bottom third, obscuring crucial details. And attached to the frame was a handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. "You're the only person I trust with this. L.M." Selena's hands were trembling as she set the note down. She should refuse, should have the courier take the painting back immediately before she got dragged any deeper into whatever this was. Instead, she found herself carefully removing the damaged canvas from its frame, examining the extent of the deterioration with professional detachment she absolutely did not feel. The painting was extraordinary, even damaged, even with layers of grime and time obscuring the original artistry. She could see the quality of the work. This wasn't some minor piece by a forgotten artist. This was museum caliber, possibly worth millions if it could be authenticated and properly restored. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello? Did you receive the painting?"
Lucian's voice, unmistakable even through the phone's speaker. I received something that belongs in a museum vault, not a restoration lab run by someone you met once at a gala. You're the best restorer in New York. I did my research. Your research clearly didn't include the part where I'm not interested in working with criminals. Silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Harder. Who told you that? Does it matter? Yes. No, it really doesn't. Selena was gripping the phone too tightly. I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. I'll have the painting returned to... Where did this even come from? My family's private collection. It's been in our vault for 60 years. My grandfather acquired it under circumstances I'm sure were less than legal, but I was 3 years old at the time, so I can't really be blamed for his crimes. Just your own? Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, a low laugh. Fair. Can I come to the lab? No. I'll bring coffee. Good coffee, not the terrible museum cafeteria sludge. Still no. Please. The single word spoken without artifice or manipulation made her hesitate. In that pause, she heard Marcus's warning, felt the weight of common sense screaming at her to hang up and forget Lucian Moretti existed. 1 hour, she heard herself say. You explain where this painting came from, I assess whether it can even be restored, and then you take it back. Agreed. He showed up in 45 minutes carrying 2 cups of coffee from a shop in Tribeca that Selena had walked past 100 times but never entered because a single cup cost what she usually spent on groceries. He also looked like he hadn't slept. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. His hair was slightly disheveled, gray eyes shadowed with exhaustion. You look terrible, Selena said by way of greeting. Honesty, I like that. Lucien handed her one of the coffee cups. I haven't been sleeping well. Guilty conscience? Something like that. She led him deeper into the restoration lab, acutely aware of his presence in her workspace. The lab was her sanctuary, organized chaos, temperature and humidity carefully controlled, north-facing windows providing perfect natural light for examining paintings. Having Lucien here felt like inviting a wolf into a place designed for smaller, more delicate creatures. He stopped in front of her workbench where the damaged Renaissance painting lay. What do you think? I think this belongs in a museum, not someone's private vault. Agreed. That's why I brought it to you. Selena studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. You're not making sense. If you want it in a museum, donate it. You don't need me for that. I need you to restore it first. I need to know what it looks like when someone removes 60 years of damage and neglect and brings it back to what the artist intended. He moved closer to the workbench, his attention fixed on the painting with genuine focus. My grandfather stole this from a Jewish family in 1943, bought it for nothing from someone desperate to escape occupied France. It's been in our vault ever since, hidden away like all the other things my family acquired through violence and theft. The confession hung in the air between them. Selena set down her coffee carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me at the gala if people can change, if broken things can be saved. Lucian looked at her then, and the raw honesty in his expression made her chest ache. I'm trying to figure out if that's possible. If someone like me, someone born into a legacy of blood and crime, can do something decent, something that matters. By returning stolen art? By starting somewhere? By taking one thing my family destroyed and making it right? His voice had gone rough. The painting belonged to the Bernstein family, Sarah and Jacob Bernstein. They had a daughter, Rebecca, who was 9 years old when they sold everything they owned to buy passage to America. This painting was part of what they sacrificed. My grandfather paid them a fraction of its worth, knowing they had no choice. Selena's throat had tightened. What happened to them? They made it to New York. Rebecca Bernstein is still alive. She's 87, living in a nursing home in Queens. She doesn't know this painting survived. I want to give it back to her, restored, perfect, the way it looked when her parents hung it in their home in Paris. The silence in the lab was absolute. Outside, traffic hummed through Manhattan streets. Somewhere in the building, a janitor pushed a cleaning cart down a hallway. Normal sounds of normal life while Selena stood in her restoration space trying to process what Lucien had just told her. This is manipulative, she said finally. Yes. You're using a stolen painting and a tragic story to, what? Get me to agree to see you again? Partially. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. But the story is true. Rebecca Bernstein is real, and I genuinely want to return this painting to her family. You could hire any restorer in the city. I don't trust anyone else. Lucienne turned to face her fully. You're good at your job because you care. You don't just restore paintings, you bring them back to life because you believe they deserve to exist as they were meant to be. That's what I need. Someone who won't just make this painting acceptable. Someone who'll make it perfect. Selena looked at the damaged canvas, at the young woman's face partially obscured by water stains and lifted paint, at the window light that had once illuminated her features with Renaissance precision. She thought about Sarah and Jacob Bernstein selling their lives piece by piece, about a 9-year-old girl watching her family's treasures disappear into the hands of men who valued profit over humanity. 3 months, she said quietly. Minimum. This kind of damage requires careful stabilization before I can even begin actual restoration. The canvas needs to be relined, the paint layer consolidated, the water damage mitigated. It's going to be expensive. Money isn't a concern. And you can't visit constantly. I need to focus. Once a week. Once every 2 weeks. Once a week, Lucian repeated firmly. And you have dinner with me once before I leave tonight. Selena's pulse jumped. That wasn't part of the agreement. I'm adding it now. 1 dinner. Somewhere public, well lit, where you can feel safe telling me to go to hell if I step out of line. 2 hours maximum. His expression softened slightly. I promise I'm not trying to drag you into my world. I just want to spend time with someone who doesn't look at me like I'm a monster or an opportunity. Every rational cell in her brain was screaming refusal. Marcus's warning echoed in her memory. Crime family. Dangerous. People who make problems disappear. But there was something in the way Lucian stood there, exhausted and raw, talking about returning stolen paintings to elderly women in nursing homes. Something that suggested maybe the man asking if broken things could be saved wasn't talking about art at all. 2 hours, Selena said. Somewhere public. And if you so much as hint at anything illegal, I'm walking out. His smile transformed his entire face. Deal. They ate at a small Italian restaurant in the village, tucked into a corner booth where the lighting was warm and the noise of other conversations provided enough cover that Selena felt safely anonymous. Lucienne ordered wine she couldn't pronounce and pasta that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking it for 70 years. Tell me something true, he said after the waiter left. Something you've never told anyone at those museum galas. Selena considered lying, deflecting. Instead, she heard herself say, I hate those events because they remind me I'm only valuable as long as I'm useful. The donors don't care about me. They care about what I can do for their collections. The moment my hands stop being steady, or my eyes stop being sharp, I become irrelevant. Lucienne was quiet for a moment. You think people only value you for your skills? Don't you? No. He leaned back, studying her. I value you because you looked at me at that gala and didn't pretend to be impressed. You saw exactly who I was and called me on it. That's rare. Genuine reactions are rare in my life. Because you're surrounded by criminals and sycophants? Yes. The blunt admission startled her. Lucienne took a sip of wine, his expression distant. My father died 2 years ago, he said quietly. Heart attack. Dropped dead in the middle of a business meeting, surrounded by men who'd spent decades helping him build an empire out of blood and illegal money. You know what they did? They called me before they called an ambulance. Because maintaining the appearance of control mattered more than trying to save his life. Selena's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a terrible person. Violent, manipulative, cruel to my mother before she had the sense to leave him when I was 10. But he was my father, and I inherited everything he built whether I wanted it or not. Lucian's jaw tightened. I studied art history at Yale. Did you know that? I was going to work for museums, maybe teach. I wanted to spend my life around beautiful things created by people who believed beauty mattered. What happened? My father died, and suddenly I was the only thing standing between the Moretti organization and complete chaos. Cousins, uncles, business partners, everyone wanted a piece of what he'd built. If I'd walked away, people would have died. Entire networks would have collapsed into violence. So you stayed.
So I stayed.
He looked at her then, and she saw the weight of it in his eyes. I convinced myself I could make it better. Run the legitimate businesses, slowly extract us from the illegal operations, transform my father's empire into something clean. Did it work? Does it look like it worked? The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. I'm still signing off on things that keep me awake at night. Still sitting in rooms with men who solve problems with violence. Still living a life I never wanted. Selena set down her wine glass carefully. Then why haven't you walked away? Because I'm a coward. The confession came out flat, matter of fact. Because walking away means admitting I can't fix what my father broke. It means accepting that some legacies are too toxic to redeem. You're returning stolen art to a woman in a nursing home. That doesn't sound like a coward to me. That's one painting, one small gesture that doesn't balance the scale. Maybe balance isn't the point. Maybe you just start with one painting and see what happens. Lucien's expression shifted. Surprise or hope, or something too complicated to name. You actually believe that? I restore damaged art for a living. I believe that sometimes fixing one small broken thing can matter more than you expect. They talked for 3 hours instead of 2. Lucien asked about her work, her training, the paintings she'd restored that still haunted her. She asked about Yale, about the art history degree he'd never used, about the galleries and museums he visited when he needed to remember who he'd wanted to be. When they finally left the restaurant, Manhattan was late-night quiet, the streets glossy with rain that had started falling while they talked. Lucien called a car to take her back to Brooklyn, but before she got in, he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the headlines or the FBI reports or the family reputation. Just me." Selena should have pulled away, should have climbed into the car and let this be the end of a strange, intense evening. Instead, she squeezed his hand once. "Return the painting to Rebecca Bernstein," she said. "Do that, and maybe you're not as much of a coward as you think." His smile was small and devastating. "I'll hold you to that." The car pulled away and Selena watched through the rear window as Lucien stood on the rain-slicked sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking more alone than anyone she'd ever seen. She told herself this was just a professional arrangement. One painting, one restoration project, nothing more. But when her phone buzzed 2 days later with a message from an unknown number, her heart jumped before she even read the words. "Rebecca Bernstein has agreed to see me. I told her I had something that belonged to her family." She wept on the phone. "Thank you for making me brave enough to make the call. When can I visit the lab?" Selena stared at the message for a long time. Then, against every ounce of common sense she possessed, she typed a response. "Thursday, 2 p.m. Bring better coffee this time." She hit send before she could change her mind. And somewhere in the back of her consciousness, a warning bell started ringing that sounded suspiciously like Marcus Webb's voice telling her that men like Lucien Moretti were dangerous, and getting involved with him was a mistake she'd regret. But the damage was already done. Because Selena Vale had spent 15 years learning to see what lived beneath the surface, and when she looked at Lucien Moretti, she didn't see a criminal. She saw someone drowning who desperately wanted to be saved. Thursday came. Lucien arrived at exactly 2 p.m. carrying coffee and a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Research," he explained, setting the portfolio on her workbench. "Everything I could find about the painting. Provenance records, photographs from the Bernstein home in Paris, correspondence my grandfather kept about the purchase." Selena opened the portfolio carefully. Inside were black and white photographs showing a comfortable Parisian apartment, the Renaissance painting visible on the wall above a piano. A young girl, Rebecca, sat at the piano keys, her face serious with concentration. "Your grandfather documented his thefts? He was meticulous, kept records of everything. I think he liked having proof of what he'd acquired, how he'd acquired it. Power through documentation." Lucien's voice had gone cold. "I found these in his personal files after he died. Boxes and boxes of evidence that should have sent him to prison a dozen times over. Why didn't you turn them over to the authorities?" "Because half of them implicate people who are still alive. Still dangerous. Releasing those records would start a war I'm not prepared to fight." Selena looked at him sharply. "Yet." "What?" "You said you're not prepared to fight that war. Yet, like maybe someday you will be." Something flickered across his face. Caught. Exposed. You're too observant for your own good. Occupational hazard. She turned her attention back to the photographs. These will help with the restoration. If I can see how the painting looked in original context, I can make better decisions about color correction and structural repairs. For the next hour, they worked in companionable silence. Selena examined the damaged canvas under different lighting conditions while Lucy Yen sat nearby, reading through museum journals she kept stacked on a side table. It should have been awkward, this strange intimacy of shared space. Instead, it felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years. "Can I ask you something?" Lucian said eventually. "Depends on the question." "Why do you do this? Spend your life restoring other people's art instead of creating your own?" Selena's hands stilled on the canvas. It was a question she'd been asked before, usually by well-meaning relatives who didn't understand why she'd chosen conservation over creation. She'd developed stock answers over the years, technical, professional, deflecting. But Lucien wasn't asking professionally. He was asking personally, and somehow that changed everything. "Because I'm good at saving broken things," she said quietly. "But I'm terrible at creating new ones. Every time I've tried to paint something original, it comes out wrong, forced, like I'm trying to speak a language I don't actually know." "So you save other people's language instead?" "Yes." She met his eyes. "Is that pathetic?" "It's the most honest thing I've heard in years." Lucian stood, moving closer to the workbench. "I think you're wrong, though, about not being able to create. You're creating every time you restore a painting. You're making choices about color, about composition, about what the artist intended. That's creation. That's interpretation. What's the difference?" Selena opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Because maybe he was right. Maybe restoration was its own form of creation. Not bringing something new into existence, but bringing something lost back to life. "You're dangerous," she said instead. "I know." "No, I mean, you make me think about things differently. Question assumptions I've held for years. That's dangerous." Lucien smiled, and it was the warmth of it that undid her. "Good. You make me think I might be more than my father's legacy. That's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure." They stood there at the quiet lab, surrounded by damaged paintings and conservation tools, and Selena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was something bigger, more complicated. This was two broken people recognizing each other across the careful distance they'd both maintained from the rest of the world. This was the beginning of falling. "You should go," Selena said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I should," Lucien agreed. He didn't move. "Next week, same time. I'll be here." He left, and Selena stood alone in her lab trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it had nothing to do with damaged paintings and everything to do with the way Lucien Moretti looked at her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. We need to talk. My office. Now." The walk to Marcus's office felt like a death march. She found him behind his desk, face grave, holding a manila folder that looked ominous in its simplicity. "Sit," he said. Selena sat. Marcus opened the folder and slid several photographs across the desk. They showed her and Lucien at the Italian restaurant, leaving together. His hand catching hers on the rain-slicked sidewalk. "Where did you get these?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "A friend at the FBI. They've been watching Lucien Moretti for years, Selena. Surveillance, wiretaps, financial tracking, and now you're in those files too." The world tilted slightly. "I'm not doing anything illegal." "You're associating with someone under federal investigation. That makes you a person of interest, whether you like it or not." Marcus leaned forward. "I warned you to stay away from him." "He's commissioning a restoration. That's not illegal. He's commissioning time with you. The painting is just an excuse." Marcus's voice gentled slightly. "I know you think you see something good in him. Maybe you're even right. But that doesn't change what he is, what he's capable of. Men like Lucien Moretti don't have normal relationships. They have leverage and liabilities." "You don't know him. Neither do you. That's my point." He tapped the photographs. "Walk away, Selena. Finish the restoration if you must, but keep it professional. No more dinners, no more personal conversations. And for God's sake, stop looking at him like he's someone you could save." Selena stood, anger flaring hot and sudden.
You don't get to tell me who I can talk to. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you to trust my judgment.
Your judgment is compromised. Marcus stood too, frustration creasing his face. I've watched you fall for broken things your entire career, Selena. Damaged paintings, impossible restorations, projects no one else would touch. But this isn't a painting. This is a man with blood on his hands, and falling for him won't end well. The words hit like a slap. Selena grabbed the photographs, shoving them back across the desk. I'll finish the restoration, professionally, that's all. She left before Marcus could respond, taking the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed the physical exertion to burn through the anger and fear churning in her chest. But when she got back to her lab, she stood in front of the damaged Renaissance painting and felt tears burning behind her eyes. Because Marcus was right about one thing. She did have a habit of falling for broken things. And Lucien Moretti was the most beautifully broken thing she'd ever encountered. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not Lucien's, this was different. She answered against her better judgment. Hello? Miss Vale. The voice was older, refined, with an edge that made her spine straighten. My name is Dante Moretti. I believe you've been spending time with my nephew. Selena's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. I'm calling to invite you to dinner. Tomorrow night. I'll send a car. I'm not... It wasn't a request, Miss Vale. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. The line went dead. Selena stood frozen, phone clutched in her hand, while the restoration lab's careful climate control suddenly felt suffocating. And somewhere in the city, in rooms she couldn't see, plans were being made that would determine whether she survived getting close to Lucien Moretti, or whether Marcus's warnings would prove prophetic in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The car arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early, which Selena suspected was intentional. Black sedan, tinted windows, a driver who didn't make eye contact when he opened the rear door. She climbed in, feeling like she was stepping into a coffin. She'd spent the previous night debating whether to tell Lucien about his uncle's call. Her finger had hovered over his contact at least a dozen times before she'd finally set the phone down and poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink. Because what would she say? Your uncle threatened me into having dinner with him? That would only escalate things she didn't fully understand yet. Besides, some part of her needed to see this through, needed to understand exactly what she'd walked into when she'd agreed to restore that painting. The restaurant was in Midtown, the kind of place where reservations required a month's notice, and the maitre d' knew every patron by name and net worth. Selena had worn the same black dress from the museum gala because she owned exactly 2 nice dresses, and the other one had wine stains she hadn't been able to remove. Dante Moretti was waiting at a corner table, partially obscured by shadows despite the restaurant's warm lighting. He stood when she approached, old-world manners wrapped around something predatory. Silver hair, impeccable suit, eyes the same storm gray as his nephew's, but colder, more calculating. Miss Vale, thank you for joining me. I didn't have much choice. He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Please sit. I took the liberty of ordering wine. I hope you don't mind. Selena sat because standing would have been more awkward. A waiter materialized to pour wine into crystal glasses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The whole scene felt surreal, elegant surfaces hiding whatever nightmare lived underneath. You're direct, Dante said once the waiter disappeared. I appreciate that. Saves time. What do you want? To understand your intentions regarding my nephew. Selena's fingers tightened around her wine glass. I'm restoring a painting for him, that's all. Come now. We're both adults. You've had dinner with Lucien, multiple conversations. He visits your lab weekly. Dante leaned back slightly. He hasn't shown this much interest in another human being since his father died. So I'll ask again, what are your intentions? I don't have any intentions. He commissioned a restoration. We talk about art. That's the extent of our relationship. Lying to me is unwise, Miss Vale. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Selena met Dante's eyes and saw something that made her understand why people feared the Moretti family. This wasn't theatrical menace. This was genuine danger, delivered with perfect civility. I'm not lying. I barely know him. But you'd like to know him better. I can see it in the way you're sitting right now. Defensive posture, elevated heart rate, anger mixed with fear. You care about him. That's inconvenient. Inconvenient for who?
For everyone involved. Dante took a sip of wine. Lucien is going through what I call an idealistic phase. He thinks he can transform our family's legacy into something clean, return stolen paintings, invest in legitimate businesses, somehow erase decades of history through good intentions. And you disagree?
I think he's delusional. Our family built an empire on very specific foundations.
You don't simply walk away from that empire because you suddenly developed a conscience. His voice hardened slightly, especially not when that conscience was awakened by a woman who knows nothing about our world. Selena's pulse was hammering in her ears. I didn't ask to be involved in your family's business. No, but you inserted yourself the moment you agreed to restore that painting. Do you know what that piece represents to Lucien? Redemption, a chance to do something right.
Weakness. Dante set down his glass with precise control. That painting is evidence of his grandfather's crimes. Returning it to the Bernstein woman accomplishes nothing except drawing attention to our family's past acquisitions. Attention we don't need. Attention that could trigger investigations we've spent decades avoiding. So you'd rather he hide it forever? Pretend your family didn't steal it? I'd rather he focus on maintaining the empire his father died building instead of playing philanthropist with a woman who makes him feel noble. The words hit like acid. Selena stood abruptly, chair scraping against expensive flooring. I'm leaving. Sit down. Something in Dante's voice made her freeze. Not volume. His tone hadn't changed at all. But there was steel underneath, a promise of consequences that didn't need to be articulated. She sat. Dante studied her face like she was a balance sheet he was auditing. I'm going to be very clear with you, Miss Vale, because I believe you're intelligent enough to understand subtext. My nephew is struggling with his role in our family. That struggle makes him vulnerable. Vulnerability in our world gets people killed. Then maybe your world is the problem. Perhaps. But it's the world we inhabit, and changing it isn't a matter of good intentions and returned artwork. He leaned forward slightly. You're a complication Lucien doesn't need right now. You represent a fantasy of escape that will get him hurt, or worse, if he pursues it. So I'm asking you, as politely as I know how, to finish your restoration work and remove yourself from his life. And if I don't, then I'll do it for you. Dante's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. I'll have your work history examined. Every restoration you've ever completed will be scrutinized for errors, liability, potential fraud. I'll make sure every museum board in the country knows your name for all the wrong reasons. Your career will end quietly, thoroughly, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering why no one will hire you. Selena's hands had gone numb. That's illegal? Unethical? Dante smiled without warmth. Welcome to my world, Miss Vale. This is what loving a Moretti actually looks like. Not romantic dinners and intellectual conversation, consequences, leverage, the systematic destruction of anything that threatens family interests. Lucien wouldn't let you do that. Lucien would never know I'd done it. He'd simply watch you disappear from his life and convince himself it was for the best. Dante stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. I'm not a monster. I'm a pragmatist. And pragmatically speaking, you are a threat to my nephew's safety and our family's stability. Remove yourself voluntarily or I'll do it for you. Those are your options. He dropped several $100 bills on the table, paying for a meal neither of them had touched, and walked away without looking back. Selena sat alone at the table for 20 minutes, trying to remember how to breathe. The driver took her home in silence. She climbed the stairs to her apartment on autopilot, unlocked the door, and made it exactly 3 steps inside before her phone started buzzing. Lucien. She stared at his name on the screen, Dante's threats echoing in her skull. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. She answered. Where were you tonight? His voice was sharp, worried. I went to your apartment. Your neighbor said you'd left in a car. Selena closed her eyes. I had dinner. With who? Does it matter? Selena. The way he said her name, raw, almost desperate, made her chest ache. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, just tired. You're lying. I can hear it in your voice. Sounds of movement, like he was pacing. Where are you right now? Home. Alone. Safe. I'm coming over. No. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. Don't. I need space. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, did someone threaten you? Her breath caught. Why would you ask that? Because you sound terrified, and the only thing that terrifies smart women who restore damaged paintings is when they realize they've walked into something dangerous. His voice had gone cold, controlled. Who was it? One of my uncle's people? Someone from a rival family? Lucienne, tell me who threatened you. Your uncle. The confession tumbled out before she could stop it. Dante invited me to dinner. He made it very clear that I'm a complication you don't need. The silence that followed was worse than any response could have been. She heard him breathing, measured and deliberate, like he was physically restraining himself from breaking something. What exactly did he say? Each word carefully enunciated, dangerously calm. That if I don't walk away from you, he'll destroy my career. Make sure no museum ever hires me again. Systematic, thorough destruction. Her voice cracked slightly. He called me a threat to family stability. I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. You don't understand what he's done. Threatening you crosses every line. I understand perfectly. Selena sat on her threadbare couch, exhaustion crashing through her adrenaline. I understand that your world operates on fear and leverage, that caring about you comes with consequences I'm not equipped to handle, that maybe your uncle is right and I'm making you vulnerable. Don't. Lucian's voice had gone rough. Don't let him poison this. He's trying to isolate me, control me by removing anyone who makes me think I could be better than what my father was. Maybe he's trying to protect you. By threatening an innocent woman, by using fear as a weapon, that's not protection, Selena. That's control. She could hear the pain underneath his anger, the desperate need to believe there was a difference between his actions and his family's. But sitting in her apartment with Dante's threats still fresh in her memory, she wasn't sure anymore where those lines actually fell. I need time to think, she said quietly. How much time? I don't know. Selena, please, just give me space to figure out if I'm brave enough for this, because right now I'm terrified, and I can't think clearly when I'm terrified. Another long silence, then, okay, take whatever time you need, but know this, I'm not walking away from you, and I'm going to handle my uncle. Don't do anything that makes this worse. Trust me. That's what scares me most. She hung up before he could respond, then sat in the dark of her apartment wondering when her life had become something unrecognizable. 3 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been whether the museum would approve funding for new conservation equipment. Now she was caught between a man trying to escape his criminal legacy and an uncle willing to destroy her to maintain family control. Her phone buzzed again. Text message from Marcus. I heard about the dinner. Are you okay? How did Marcus know? Unless the FBI was monitoring Dante's movements closely enough to flag everyone he met with, which meant Selena was now officially entangled in federal surveillance exactly as Marcus had warned. She texted back, I'm fine. Can we talk tomorrow? My office, 9 a.m. She didn't sleep, just lay in bed watching shadows move across her ceiling, replaying the conversation with Dante, trying to figure out if there was any version of this situation that didn't end with someone getting hurt. Marcus was waiting when she arrived at the museum the next morning. He looked exhausted, gray stubble shadowing his jaw, coffee cup leaving rings on the report scattered across his desk. Sit, he said without preamble. Selena sat. The FBI contacted me last night. They wanted to know about your relationship with Lucien Moretti and why you had dinner with Dante Moretti at Le Bernardin. Marcus rubbed his eyes. I told them you were restoring a painting, professional relationship only. But they don't believe me, and honestly, I'm not sure I believe me either. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, but that doesn't change the situation. He slid a folder across the desk. This is everything the FBI has on the Moretti family. I shouldn't be showing you this. I could lose my job just for having it, but I need you to understand what you're dealing with. Selena opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were surveillance photos, financial records, incident reports spanning decades. She saw Lucien's father shaking hands with men whose names appeared in multiple homicide investigations, saw property transfers that screamed money laundering, saw a family tree that read like a map of organized crime on the East Coast. And there, near the bottom of the most recent reports, photos of Lucien, standing outside warehouses, meeting with known associates, his face carefully neutral in every image, giving nothing away. "He's trying to get out," she said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe he's telling you what you want to hear while maintaining business as usual." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "I know you want to believe he's different, but wanting doesn't make it true. You don't know him."
"Neither do you." "Not really." He pointed to one of the surveillance photos, Lucien leaving what the report identified as a known drug distribution center. That was taken 3 months ago, after his father died, after he supposedly inherited this empire he claims to hate. Selena's stomach turned. There could be legitimate reasons. There are always legitimate reasons. Plausible deniability. That's how these families operate. Marcus closed the folder carefully. "I'm not saying Lucien is beyond redemption. I'm saying that redemption takes more than good intentions and returned artwork. It takes a complete break from the past. And right now, I see a man who's still attending meetings at drug distribution centers." The words hung between them like smoke. Selena wanted to argue, to defend Lucien, to explain that he was planning an exit, building legitimate businesses, trying to dismantle his inheritance piece by piece. But she couldn't shake the image of him leaving that warehouse, couldn't reconcile the man who talked about art history with the man in FBI surveillance photos. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. "Finish the restoration, keep it professional, and for God's sake, stop falling in love with him." "I'm not." "Yes, you are. I can see it all over your face. You look at him the way you look at paintings you think you can save." Marcus's expression softened. "But people aren't paintings, Selena. You can't just remove the damaged layers and restore them to what they were meant to be. Sometimes the damage goes too deep." She left his office feeling hollowed out, carrying the weight of surveillance photos and warnings she didn't want to hear. Her lab felt like the only safe space left, temperature-controlled, familiar, filled with damaged things she actually knew how to fix. The Renaissance painting sat on her workbench, partially restored. She'd been working on the water damage, carefully removing the dark stains that obscured the young woman's lower features. The process was delicate, painstaking, requiring absolute focus. She threw herself into the work, letting the familiar rhythm of conservation override the chaos in her mind. Cotton swabs and solvent, gentle circular motions, watching centuries of damage slowly disappear to reveal original paint underneath. Hours passed. The winter light through her north-facing windows shifted from gray morning to grayer afternoon. Her phone buzzed occasionally, messages she ignored, while she worked with the kind of desperate intensity that usually meant she was avoiding something. "You're going to damage the paint layer if you keep working this aggressively." Selena spun around. Lucien stood in the doorway of her lab, looking like he'd walked through hell to get there. His suit was rumpled, tie loosened, the careful composure he usually wore cracked around the edges. "You can't be here," she said. "I know. I came anyway." He moved into the lab slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "I confronted Dante this morning, told him if he ever threatened you again, I'd burn down everything our family built." "That's not helpful." "It's honest." Lucien stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "He's backed off. I can't promise he's happy about it, but he understands that you're off limits." "At what cost?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." Selena set down her conservation tools with exaggerated care. "Because I saw the FBI reports this morning, Lucien. I saw photos of you leaving a drug distribution center 3 months ago. So whatever you're telling your uncle about backing off, whatever promises you're making to protect me, I need to know if they're real or if I'm just another person you're manipulating." Something crumpled in his expression. He looked away, jaw tight, hands curling into fists at his sides. "That warehouse. I was there shutting down operations, not expanding them. I've been systematically dismantling my father's drug network for 8 months, meeting with distributors, paying them to walk away, transferring territories to rivals who'll absorb the business so my people don't end up dead when the income stream disappears." "That's still illegal." "Yes. It's also the only way to extract myself without triggering a war that gets people killed." He looked at her then, raw and undefended. "You want the truth? Here it is. I'm not clean. I'm probably never going to be clean. I've done things I can't undo, made choices that keep me awake at night, but I'm trying, Selena. I'm trying to become someone who deserves to stand in your lab and talk about art instead of blood money. Why me? The question came out broken. Why does it matter what I think? Because you're the first person who looked at me and saw someone worth saving. Not my money, not my connections, not what I could do for you. Just me. And that terrified me so completely that I spent 3 days convincing myself to approach you at that gala. Selena felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to do this. How to care about someone whose life looks like a federal investigation. Then don't. Walk away. Finish the painting and forget you ever met me. His voice had gone quiet, defeated. I'll understand. I'll even arrange for the FBI surveillance to stop. Make sure your name gets removed from their files. You can go back to your normal life. Is that what you want? No. I want you to give me a chance to prove I'm more than my father's legacy. I want time to build an exit that doesn't collapse into violence. I want to stand beside you in 5 years and be someone you're not ashamed to love. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. But I won't trap you in my world. If you need to leave, leave. She should have. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to take the exit he was offering, to protect herself from the inevitable disaster of loving a man trying to outrun his own history. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers with desperate strength, and she felt him shaking, this dangerous man who commanded an empire, trembling like he was afraid she'd disappear. I need you to be honest with me, Selena said. Always. Even when the truth makes you look bad. Especially then. Because if I'm going to survive this, I need to know what I'm actually dealing with. I can do that. And I need you to understand that I'm terrified, that every time my phone rings unexpectedly, I'm going to wonder if it's the FBI or your uncle or someone worse, that I'm going to have nightmares about surveillance photos and federal investigations. I understand. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like the beginning of the worst mistake of my life. Lucian's thumb traced circles against her palm, an unconscious gesture that felt more intimate than it should have. It probably is. But I'm hoping you'll make it anyway. She laughed, shaky and wet. You're asking a lot. I know. They stood there as the quiet lab, hands linked, while winter light faded outside and the weight of impossible choices settled around them. Selena knew this moment would define everything that came after. The point where she either walked away or committed fully to whatever nightmare came next. The painting, she said finally. The one you brought me. Tell me the real story. Why does returning it matter so much? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had gone distant, haunted. Because my grandfather told me about it before he died. He was in the hospital, dying of liver failure, and he started confessing. All the things he'd stolen, all the people he'd hurt. He talked about the Bernstein painting like it was the one theft that actually bothered him. Why that one specifically? Because Sarah Bernstein reminded him of his own mother, Jewish woman, refugee, desperate to save her family. He took advantage of that desperation, and it ate at him for 60 years. Lucian's hand tightened around hers. He made me promise to return it someday, to find Rebecca Bernstein and give back what he'd stolen. I was 17. I didn't understand what he was really asking, which was to be better than him, to break the cycle. His eyes met hers, gray and storm dark. I failed that promise for 10 years, built my own reputation, made my own compromises with the empire he'd created. Then I met you, and suddenly that promise felt possible again. Selena's chest ached. I'm not your redemption, Lucian. I can't be. That's too much weight for anyone to carry. I know, but you made me believe redemption was worth pursuing. That's different. She wanted to kiss him, wanted to close the distance between them and let physical contact override all the rational arguments against this. Instead, she squeezed his hand once and stepped back. I need time, she said, to finish the restoration, to process everything that's happened, to figure out if I'm strong enough for this. How much time? However long it takes to restore the painting properly. 2 months, maybe 3. And then we see if you're actually building an exit or just telling me what I want to hear. Pain flickered across his face, but he nodded. That's fair. He left,
and Selena returned to the painting with hands that shook too badly to hold her conservation tools properly. She stared at the partially revealed face of the young woman in Renaissance dress, seeing echoes of Sarah Bernstein's desperation, Rebecca's childhood loss, Lucien's grandfather's deathbed confession. So much damage, so many layers of pain built up over decades. She picked up her tools and went back to work, removing the water stains with patient precision, revealing paint underneath that had survived 4 centuries of neglect. Maybe people weren't so different from paintings after all. Maybe damage could be stabilized, preserved, integrated into something that still had value. Or maybe she was just lying to herself because walking away from Lucien Moretti felt impossible now. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Lucien visited the lab every Thursday at 2, bringing coffee and conversation, but nothing more intimate than linked hands across her workbench. They talked about art, about his slow extraction from family business, about the legitimate companies he was building in the spaces his criminal operations used to occupy. He was meticulous about honesty, even when it made him look bad. Told her about meetings with distributors who didn't want to walk away peacefully, about cousins who resented his gradual dismantling of family territory, about nights when he woke up convinced he'd made a terrible mistake and should just accept what he was. Selena listened, offering no absolution, no promises that everything would work out, just presence, just the steady acknowledgement that she was still here, still choosing to see this through. The painting slowly transformed under her hands. The water damage receded. The tears in the canvas were stabilized and filled. Colors emerged from beneath centuries of yellowed varnish, deep blues, rich golds, the luminous skin tones that Renaissance masters had perfected. By late February, the restoration was nearly complete. Just final varnishing and authentication documentation remained. "It's beautiful," Lucien said during one of his Thursday visits. He stood beside her workbench, staring at the painting with something like grief in his eyes. "The Bernsteins will finally see what their family lost." "When are you planning to return it?" "Next week. I've arranged a meeting with Rebecca at the nursing home. Her daughter will be there, and her grandson. 3 generations getting back something my grandfather stole." "That's good. That's really good. Will you come with me?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't think that's appropriate. This is a family moment." "You're part of this. You brought the painting back to life. Rebecca should meet the person who made that possible." His hand found hers across the workbench. "And selfishly, I want you there. Want you to see that the exit I'm building is real." Selena studied his face, seeing the vulnerability he'd stopped trying to hide around her. "Okay, I'll come." His smile was devastating. They set the date for the following Wednesday. Selena spent the intervening days finishing the varnish work, documenting the restoration process, preparing a conservation report that would travel with the painting when it finally reached its rightful owners. Tuesday night, her phone rang at 11:30. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then some instinct made her pick up. "Miss Vale?" Dante's voice cold and precisely controlled. "I need you to listen very carefully." Her blood went ice. "What do you want?" "For you to understand that my nephew's idealism is about to get him killed." The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" "Lucien has been systematically dismantling our family's operations under the delusion that he can simply walk away from this life. What he doesn't realize, what you've apparently encouraged him not to realize, is that power vacuums don't stay empty. Rival families have been watching his slow retreat. They're planning to move on our remaining territories. Tomorrow night." Selena's hand had gone numb around the phone. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because tomorrow night, when Lucien meets with our remaining distributors to finalize the last territory transfer, those distributors are going to be ambushed. He'll be caught in the crossfire. And unless he's prepared, unless someone convinces him to cancel that meeting, he's going to die trying to do the right thing." "Then you tell him. You're his uncle. He doesn't trust me anymore. Not since I threatened you. But he trusts you." Dante's voice had gone quiet, almost gentle. "So I'm asking you, Miss Vale, to save my nephew's life. Convince him to cancel the Wednesday meeting. Keep him with you, somewhere safe, while I handle the threat." "How do I know this isn't manipulation? Another way to control him?" "You don't. You're simply going to have to decide whether you trust that I love my nephew enough to protect him, even from his own noble intentions." The line went dead. Selena sat frozen in her apartment, phone clutched in shaking hands, while her mind raced through possibilities. Dante could be lying. This could be another elaborate manipulation designed to isolate Lucian from his plans, to keep him dependent on family protection. Or it could be true, and ignoring the warning could get Lucian killed. She called him. He answered on the first ring. "Selena? It's late. Are you okay?" "Your uncle called me. He said there's going to be an ambush tomorrow night, that rival families are planning to hit your meeting with the distributors." Silence. Then carefully, "What else did he say?" "That I should convince you to cancel. Stay somewhere safe while he handles the threat." "And you're calling to warn me?" "I'm calling because I don't know if he's telling the truth or manipulating us both, and I need you to help me figure out which it is." She heard him moving, sounds of him getting dressed. "I'm coming over." "Lucien, I'm not having this conversation on the phone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, looking like he'd thrown on clothes in the dark. They sat on her couch in the pre-dawn quiet while he explained the reality she'd been trying not to see. "He's probably telling the truth," Lucien said quietly. "I've been hearing rumors about rival families testing our weakened territories. My withdrawal has created opportunities they want to exploit." "Then cancel the meeting." "I can't. If I don't finalize these transfers, the people currently running those operations are left vulnerable. They're not soldiers, Selena. They're distributors, low-level operators who got dragged into this world the same way I did. If I abandon them now, they die. And if you go to that meeting, you die. Maybe. Or maybe I go prepared with enough security to handle whatever comes." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I knew this wouldn't be clean. Knew there'd be risks. But I'm so close to being done. One more transfer, and I'm out. Completely out." Selena felt tears burning. "I can't lose you right when I've decided you're worth keeping." His laugh was broken. "Terrible timing on your part." "This isn't funny." "I know." He pulled her closer, and she let herself sink against him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her ear. "But I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. I've been planning for this possibility for months. I have contingencies." "Contingencies don't stop bullets." "No, but they improve the odds." He tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I need to do this, need to see it through, not just for the people counting on me, but for myself. Because if I back down now, I'll always wonder if I could have made it, if the exit was real or just another fantasy." She wanted to argue, wanted to lock him in her apartment and refuse to let him leave until the danger passed. Instead, she kissed him, desperate, frightened, angry at the universe for making her fall for someone whose life looked like a federal case file. He kissed her back like he was memorizing the taste of her, the shape of her mouth, the way she fit against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "After tomorrow," he whispered. "After I survive whatever's coming, we're going to have that normal life you're terrified of wanting. Museum visits and quiet dinners and arguments about whether the Caravaggio needs better lighting. Promise me." "I promise." He left as dawn was breaking, and Selena stood at her window watching his car disappear into early morning traffic, trying not to think about surveillance photos and ambushes and the fact that she'd just let the man she loved walk straight into gunfire. Wednesday crawled past with agonizing slowness. She tried to work on the painting's final documentation, but her hands shook too badly to hold her camera steady. Tried to eat lunch, but everything tasted like ash. Tried to call Lucien, but he didn't answer, probably already at the warehouse, already preparing for whatever nightmare awaited. Marcus found her at 4, sitting in her lab staring at the restored Renaissance painting. "I heard about the meeting tonight," he said quietly. "How though?" "The FBI has been monitoring the situation. They know something's going down. They're debating whether to intervene or let it play out." He sat beside her. "I'm sorry, Selena. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "Can they stop it? The FBI? Can they shut down the meeting before someone gets hurt?" "They could, but then Lucien gets caught in the middle of a federal raid, and any chance he has at a clean exit disappears." Marcus's expression was grave. "Sometimes there are no good options, just different versions of bad." Selena closed her eyes against tears. "I should have made him cancel." He wouldn't have listened. Men like Lucien don't cancel. They see things through, even when it kills them. The hours until the meeting were torture. Selena paced her apartment, phone clutched in her hand, jumping at every notification that wasn't from Lucian. News alerts about traffic, weather, meaningless updates from apps she'd forgotten she'd installed. Nothing from him. At 8:30, her phone finally rang. Marcus. "Turn on the news," he said without preamble. "Channel 7. She fumbled for the remote with numb fingers. The television flickered to life, showing aerial footage of a warehouse district in Queens. Police lights, ambulances, crime scene tape cordoning off an entire block. The news anchor's voice cut through her paralysis. Developing story out of Queens tonight, where reports of gunfire have brought heavy police presence to an industrial area near the waterfront. Sources indicate multiple casualties, though we're still waiting for official confirmation from NYPD. We'll bring you updates as this story develops." Selena's phone slipped from her hand. Somewhere in Queens, in a warehouse surrounded by flashing lights and yellow tape, Lucien was either alive or dead, and she had no way of knowing which. The hospital smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. Selena pushed through the emergency room doors at 10:43 p.m., her clothes still the same ones she'd worn to work that morning, her hands shaking so badly she'd had to try the door handle 3 times before it opened. The waiting room was chaos. Uniformed officers clustered near the intake desk, radios crackling static. A woman sobbed into a cell phone in the corner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow-white that made everyone look half dead already. Selena grabbed the first nurse she saw. "Lucien Moretti. He was brought in from the warehouse shooting. I need to know if he's alive." The nurse's eyes went wary. "Are you family?" The word stuck in her throat. What was she? A woman who restored paintings? Someone he'd known for 3 months? The person who'd let him walk into gunfire because she believed his promises about contingencies? "I need to know if he's alive." "Wait here. I'll check." The nurse disappeared through double doors that swung shut with mechanical finality. Selena stood in the middle of the waiting room, trying to remember how to breathe. Around her, the machinery of crisis response ground forward, officers taking statements, doctors being paged, the television mounted in the corner showing aerial footage of the warehouse district she'd watched from her apartment. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. Any update?" She typed back with numb fingers. "At hospital. Waiting." Someone touched her shoulder. She spun around and found herself face to face with Dante Moretti. He looked like hell. His immaculate suit was rumpled, tie missing, a spot of what might have been blood on his collar. But his eyes were steady, cold, calculating even in crisis. "He's alive," Dante said without preamble. "In surgery. 3 gunshot wounds, shoulder, abdomen, leg. The doctors won't commit to odds yet." Selena's knees buckled. Dante caught her elbow, guided her to a plastic chair bolted to the floor. She sat because standing was no longer possible. "What happened?" Her voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. "Exactly what I warned you about. Rival family ambushed the meeting. Lucian's security held them off long enough for police to arrive, but not before..." Dante's jaw tightened. "He took 3 bullets trying to protect one of the distributors. Stupid, noble, exactly like him. You said you'd handle the threat." "I tried. My people identified the shooters 2 hours before the meeting. I warned Lucien. He went anyway." Something cracked in Dante's controlled facade. "My nephew is many things, Miss Vale, but he's never been a coward, even when cowardice would save his life." They sat in silence while the hospital's machinery of trauma care hummed around them. Selena stared at the scuffed linoleum floor, trying to process that Lucien was in surgery, that bullets had torn through him, that noble intentions hadn't been enough to stop physics and ammunition. "You blame me," she said finally. Dante looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I blame myself for letting him believe he could walk away cleanly, for not forcing him out earlier before the other families noticed our weakness. You threatened to destroy my career if I didn't leave him alone. I did. I'm not apologizing for that. But I underestimated how much you'd changed him, how completely you'd made him believe he deserved better than what our family offered." Dante's voice went quiet. "He talked about you constantly, your work, your integrity, the way you looked at damaged paintings, like they were worth saving. It drove me insane. Because I made him weak. Because you made him hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing you can give someone trying to survive in our world." A doctor emerged from the surgery wing, still in scrubs, mask pulled down around their neck. They scanned the waiting room, found Dante, walked over with the measured pace that probably meant they'd delivered bad news so many times it had become routine. Mr. Moretti made it through surgery, the doctor said. The next 48 hours are critical. He lost a lot of blood. The abdominal wound caused internal damage we had to repair. But he's stable for now.
Selena felt something unclench in her chest. Can I see him? The doctor glanced at Dante, then back at her. Are you family? She's with me, Dante said before Selena could answer. She can see him.
They followed the doctor through a maze of corridors into the ICU. Lucien lay in a bed surrounded by monitors that beeped and hummed, tracking heartbeat, oxygen, blood pressure, all the mechanical measurements that determined whether he lived or died. He looked smaller than she remembered, pale against white sheets, breathing assisted by tubes and machines. Selena pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines taped to his skin. His fingers were cold. She rubbed them gently, trying to transfer warmth from her body to his. I'm here, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Behind her, Dante stood in the doorway like a sentinel. When she glanced back, his expression was unreadable. You should go home, he said quietly. Get some sleep. I'll call if anything changes. I'm staying. Miss Vale, I said I'm staying. She met his eyes with a defiance she didn't entirely feel. You can have me arrested if that's what it takes, but I'm not leaving him alone. Something shifted in Dante's face. Respect, maybe, or resignation. Fine. I'll have coffee sent up. He disappeared, leaving Selena alone with the sound of monitors and Lucien's labored breathing. She sat holding his hand through the long hours of early morning, watching his chest rise and fall, counting heartbeats on the monitor display, bargaining with a universe that didn't care about her promises or his redemption. Dawn came slowly, gray winter light filtering through the ICU's small window. Lucien's condition remained stable but unchanged. Doctors checked vitals, adjusted medications, spoke in low tones about inflammatory markers and infection risk. Selena stayed. Marcus brought her coffee and a change of clothes around 8 a.m. He looked exhausted, worry etched in the lines around his eyes. The FBI wants to talk to you, he said quietly. I don't have anything to tell them. They know you were involved with Lucien. They want a statement about the warehouse shooting, about his business dealings, about everything you know regarding the Moretti family operations. Selena's grip tightened on Lucien's hand. I want a lawyer. Smart. I already called someone. She'll meet you downstairs in an hour. Marcus glanced at Lucien's unconscious form. I'm sorry this happened. I know I warned you away from him, but I never wanted this. I know. He left, and Selena returned to her vigil. Waiting. Watching. Willing Lucien to wake up so she could yell at him for being noble and stupid and making her fall in love with someone whose life came with federal investigations and hospital vigils. At 2:30 p.m. on the second day, his eyes opened. Selena was half asleep in her chair when she felt his fingers move in hers. She jerked awake, leaned forward, saw him staring at the ceiling with glassy, pain-dulled eyes. Lucien? He turned his head slowly, focused on her face with visible effort. You're here. Of course I'm here, you idiot. Where else would I be? His mouth curved slightly. Home. Safe. Away from my disaster of a life. Too late for that. She was crying without realizing it, tears tracking down her face while she held his hand like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. You promised me normal, museum visits and quiet dinners. You promised. I know. I'm sorry. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. The distributor, young guy, 23, got dragged into this by his father. I couldn't let him die. So you almost died instead. Seemed like a fair trade at the time. It wasn't. It isn't. Selena wiped her face roughly. Don't you dare do that again. Don't you dare make me fall in love with you and then get yourself killed being heroic. Something changed in his expression, wonder or pain or both. You love me? Apparently I'm just as stupid as you are. He laughed, then winced, the movement clearly causing agony. That's the worst declaration of love I've ever heard. Yeah, well, you're the worst almost dead person I've ever loved, so we're even. A nurse appeared to check his vitals, followed by a doctor who asked questions about pain levels and sensation in his extremities.
Selena retreated to give them space, standing near the window where winter sunlight filtered through reinforced glass. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then some instinct made her answer. "Miss Vale." A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "This is Special Agent Caroline Chen with the FBI. We need to speak with you regarding Lucien Moretti and the warehouse incident." "I have a lawyer." "That's fine. Bring your lawyer, but we need to speak with you today. This afternoon, if possible." Selena's stomach dropped. "Am I being charged with something?" "Not at this time. We simply need your cooperation in an ongoing investigation." "And if I refuse?" "Then we'll be forced to consider you an uncooperative witness, which could complicate things significantly." Agent Chen's tone suggested she'd made this speech before. 3 p.m. at the field office in Manhattan. Your lawyer has the address." The line went dead. Selena stood staring at her phone, trying to process that she was now actively involved in a federal investigation, that the FBI considered her cooperation necessary, that loving Lucien Moretti had dragged her into legal territory she'd never imagined navigating. When the doctor finished examining Lucien and the nurse left to update charts, she returned to his bedside. "The FBI wants to interview me," she said without preamble. His expression went carefully neutral. "When?" "This afternoon. They made it clear refusing isn't really an option. Don't tell them anything." "Lucien, I'm serious. They're looking for evidence to build a RICO case against my family. Anything you say can be used to implicate people who had nothing to do with the shooting." His hand found hers, squeezed with surprising strength. "Please, trust me on this. I'm not going to lie to federal agents. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to exercise your right to remain silent about things you don't actually know. You restored a painting. You had dinner with me. That's all you need to say." Selena pulled her hand free. "That's not all I know, and you know it. I know about the territory transfers, the distributor meetings, your plan to dismantle your father's empire. I know enough to be dangerous. Then be smart about what you share. The FBI doesn't care about protecting you, Selena. They care about building their case. You're a tool to them, nothing more." "And what am I to you? Another complication in your exit strategy?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Lucien flinched, pain flashing across his face that had nothing to do with his injuries. "You're the reason I'm still trying," he said quietly. "The reason I took bullets protecting someone else's kid instead of walking away and letting everyone burn. So no, you're not a complication. You're the point." She wanted to be moved by that, wanted to let it soften the fear and anger churning in her chest. Instead, she felt exhausted, wrung out, completely unprepared for the reality of loving someone whose life came with FBI interviews and hospital rooms. "I have to go," she said. "The meeting is in 2 hours. Selena, I'll be careful. I'll have a lawyer. I'll exercise my rights." She leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. "But I'm not going to lie for you. I can't build something real on that foundation." She left before he could respond, before the look in his eyes could change her mind. The FBI field office was in Lower Manhattan, a nondescript building that looked like 1,000 other office buildings except for the security screening in the lobby. Selena's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Reeves, who Marcus had recommended, met her outside. "Listen to me very carefully," Patricia said as they waited for their escort. "You answer only the questions I approve. If I tell you not to answer, you don't answer. If you're not sure about something, you look at me before you speak. Understand?" "Yes. And remember, you're not under arrest. You're a witness. They need your cooperation more than you need to cooperate." Agent Chen met them on the 3rd floor. She was younger than Selena expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She led them to a small conference room with a table, chairs, and a recording device that looked expensive. "Thank you for coming," Agent Chen said, settling into a chair across from them. "This interview will be recorded. For the record, please state your name and confirm you're here voluntarily." Selena glanced at Patricia, who nodded slightly. "Selena Vale. And yes, I'm here voluntarily." "Good. Let's start with your relationship to Lucien Moretti. How did you meet?" "He approached me at a museum gala, asked me to restore a painting." "And you agreed?" "Yes. It's my job. I restore damaged artwork." Agent Chen consulted notes on a tablet. The painting in question was acquired by the Moretti family in 1943 from a Jewish refugee family fleeing occupied France. Were you aware of the painting's provenance when you accepted the commission? Lucien told me about it. He wanted to return it to the original family. That's very noble. Did he explain why he was returning it now, 60 years after his grandfather acquired it? Selena hesitated. Patricia touched her arm lightly. A warning. You'll have to ask him that question, Selena said carefully. I'm asking you. What did Lucien tell you about his motivations? That he wanted to do something right, to return stolen property to its rightful owner. And you believed him. I had no reason not to. Agent Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. Miss Vale, we've been monitoring the Moretti organization for 18 months. We know Lucien has been systematically transferring criminal operations to rival families. We know he's been meeting with distributors, paying them to walk away, slowly dismantling the empire his father built. What we don't know is why. Selena kept her face neutral. I wouldn't know anything about that. Really? Because our surveillance shows you had multiple dinners with Lucien Moretti, long conversations in your restoration lab, private meetings where federal wiretaps mysteriously went dark. Agent Chen leaned forward slightly. You expect me to believe you spent all that time discussing Renaissance paintings? My relationship with Lucien is personal. It has nothing to do with your investigation. Everything about Lucien Moretti has to do with my investigation, including the woman he's been spending time with, confiding in, possibly using to launder money or hide assets. Patricia's hand landed firmly on Selena's arm before she could respond. My client is not involved in any illegal financial activities. If you have evidence suggesting otherwise, present it. If not, stop fishing. Agent Chen's smile was thin. Let me be very clear about your situation, Miss Vale. The Moretti family is going down. We have enough evidence to charge multiple members with racketeering, money laundering, drug distribution, and conspiracy to commit murder. The only question is how many people go down with them. Is that a threat? Selena heard herself ask. It's a reality check. You're young, talented, with a promising career ahead of you. It would be a shame to see that career destroyed because you protected a criminal organization out of misplaced loyalty. Lucien isn't... Patricia cut her off. My client has answered your questions. Unless you're charging her with something, we're done here. We're not done. Not even close. Agent Chen pulled a folder from beneath her tablet, slid it across the table. These are financial records from accounts linked to the Moretti organization. Notice anything interesting? Selena opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, investment documents. Her eyes scanned the pages, not understanding what she was supposed to see. Then she found it. Her name, listed as a beneficiary on an offshore account containing $250,000. I don't understand, she whispered. That makes two of us. Care to explain why Lucien Moretti transferred $250,000 into an account with your name on it? The room tilted. Selena stared at the documents, at her name printed in neat type next to transaction records and account numbers she'd never seen before. Her hands had gone numb. Her throat had closed. I didn't know about this. The words came out strangled. That's what they all say. I'm serious. I've never seen these accounts. I didn't authorize any transfers. I don't understand how my name is on this. Agent Chen studied her face with clinical precision. You really didn't know? No. The single word hung in the air like a confession. Patricia was saying something, probably warning her to stop talking, but Selena couldn't hear through the rushing in her ears, because suddenly everything looked different. All of Lucien's talk about redemption and exits and wanting to be better. What if it had all been a setup? What if she'd been the perfect cover for hiding criminal proceeds, an innocent art restorer who could claim ignorance while her name appeared on accounts holding laundered money? I need to speak with my client privately, Patricia said firmly. Of course. Agent Chen stood, collected her tablet. Take your time. We'll continue this conversation when you're ready. She left, and the moment the door closed, Selena's composure shattered. She bent forward, head between her knees, trying to breathe through the panic clawing up her throat. They set me up, she managed. Lucien used me to hide money. We don't know that yet. Patricia's voice was steady, professional. There could be explanations, identity theft, clerical error.
We need to investigate before jumping to conclusions. My name is on offshore accounts containing money from a criminal organization. That's not a clerical error.
No, it's not. Patricia sat back, fingers drumming against the table. But it also doesn't mean Lucian deliberately set you up. It could mean someone else in his organization used your identity without his knowledge. We need more information. Selena's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. The account was protection. I was going to tell you. Please let me explain. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She showed the message to Patricia, whose expression went grim.
Don't respond. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. But Selena was already typing, fury overriding caution. You put my name on illegal accounts without telling me. That's not protection. That's using me. The response came immediately. I put money aside in case you needed to disappear. In case my world came down and you got caught in the collapse. It was insurance, not a setup. I swear. She stared at the words, trying to decide if they changed anything. Maybe Lucian genuinely believed he was protecting her. Maybe in his twisted worldview, secretly opening offshore accounts in her name without her knowledge or consent was an act of love. But it was also illegal. And it had made her an accessory to money laundering, whether she'd known about it or not. Another message arrived. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I thought I had more time. Selena showed Patricia the messages. The lawyer's expression went from grim to something worse. This is bad, Patricia said quietly. Those texts can be used as evidence of his intent. They might help prove you weren't complicit, but they also confirm he put the money there deliberately. What do I do? You tell the truth. All of it. Every conversation, every dinner, everything Lucian told you about his exit plans. The FBI is offering you a chance to cooperate. Take it. That makes me an informant. That makes you a survivor. Patricia leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. I know you care about him, but caring about someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for their mistakes. Selena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down. In a hospital across town, Lucien was recovering from gunshot wounds sustained protecting someone else. And here she sat, discovering he'd implicated her in federal crimes while claiming it was protection. She thought about the Renaissance painting sitting in her lab, about Sarah and Jacob Bernstein selling their lives piece by piece, about damage that went too deep to restore. I need to see him, she said. Before I decide anything, I need to hear this from him directly. Patricia shook her head. That's a bad idea. I don't care. I need to know if he's lying to save himself or if he genuinely thought he was protecting me. And if it's somewhere in between, then I deal with it. But I can't make this choice without looking him in the eye. They left the FBI office with Agent Chen's warning echoing behind them. They had 48 hours to decide about cooperation before the investigation moved forward with or without Selena's help. The drive to the hospital felt surreal. Manhattan traffic, normal people going about normal lives, while Selena's entire world had inverted in the space of an afternoon. Patricia insisted on coming with her, probably afraid Selena would do something legally catastrophic without supervision. They found Lucien awake, sitting up slightly in his hospital bed despite the obvious pain it caused. Dante was there too, standing near the window like he'd been waiting for this confrontation. Get out, Selena said, looking at Dante. Miss Vale, get out. This conversation is between me and your nephew. Dante glanced at Lucien, who nodded slightly. The older man left without argument, and Patricia positioned herself near the door, present but giving them space. Selena approached the bed slowly, phone in hand, the offshore account documents clutched in her other fist. She dropped them on Lucian's lap. Explain. He looked at the documents, and something died in his eyes. The FBI showed me that you put my name on accounts containing $250,000 in what I'm guessing is laundered money. So, yes, they showed me. Her voice was shaking. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just supposed to discover I'm an accessory to federal crimes when they arrested me? I was going to tell you after... He stopped, grimaced. There's no good answer. Yes, I should have told you immediately, but I was afraid you'd refuse, and I needed you to have options if things went wrong. Options like fleeing the country with illegal money? Options like survival if my exit collapsed and took you down with it? Lucienne met her eyes, and she saw genuine anguish there. You don't understand how precarious this all was. How many ways it could have failed. I needed you to have escape money, clean identity documents, a way out if the FBI came after everyone connected to my family. So you made that decision for me, put my name on criminal accounts without my knowledge or consent. Yes, the blunt admission was somehow worse than excuses would have been. Selena felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. You used me. Dressed it up as protection, but you used me exactly the way your uncle said you would. That's not... Lucian tried to sit up further, winced, fell back against pillows. I love you. Everything I've done has been to keep you safe. By making me a federal accomplice? By giving you options I never had? By making sure you could run if my mistakes caught up to you? Those weren't your mistakes to make for me. The words came out raw, furious. I'm not some damaged painting you can restore by making decisions about what layers to remove. I'm a person. I deserve honesty. I deserve to know you were putting my name on illegal accounts before the FBI showed me evidence. Lucienne's face had gone pale. You're right. I know you're right. But I can't undo it now, and the FBI is going to use those accounts to destroy you unless you cooperate with their investigation. Agent Chen suggested the same thing. Then do it. Tell them everything. Give them whatever they need to build their case against my family. Selena stared at him. You're telling me to inform on you. I'm telling you to save yourself. The exit was supposed to be clean, but it's not. I failed, and I won't let you pay for my failure. His hand reached for hers, but she stepped back. Please, Selena, work with the FBI. Tell them about the territory transfers, the distributor meetings, everything I told you about dismantling operations. Give them enough to satisfy their investigation. And throw you under the bus in the process. I'm already under the bus. Have been since the warehouse shooting, but you still have a chance to walk away clean. Patricia cleared her throat from near the door. We should go. Give you both time to process this. But Selena couldn't move. She stood frozen beside Lucienne's hospital bed, staring at the man she'd fallen in love with, trying to reconcile the person who'd talked about redemption with the person who'd implicated her in federal crimes without warning. Did you ever love me? The question came out broken. Or was I just convenient? The perfect cover for your exit strategy? Pain flashed across Lucian's face. I love you more than I've ever loved anything. That's why I put the money aside. That's why I'm telling you to cooperate with the FBI, even though it means I'll probably spend the next decade in prison. Because your survival matters more than mine. That's not love. That's control dressed up in noble intentions. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm so damaged I don't know the difference anymore. He looked away, jaw tight. But damaged or not, I'm begging you to save yourself. Tell the FBI everything. Let them use it to dismantle what's left of my family's empire. And then forget you ever met me. Selena backed toward the door, each step feeling like tearing skin. I can't do this. I can't be in a room with you right now. I know. She fled, Patricia following close behind. They made it to the parking garage before Selena's composure finally shattered completely. She leaned against Patricia's car and sobbed, for Lucienne, for herself, for the impossible situation love had dragged them both into. Patricia waited until the worst of it passed before speaking. What do you want to do? I don't know. Tell me what happens if I cooperate. You give the FBI everything you know. They use it to build their RICO case. You testify if it goes to trial. In exchange, they grant you immunity and remove your name from the money laundering charges. And Lucienne? Goes to prison? Probably for a long time. Selena closed her eyes. And if I don't cooperate? You get charged as an accessory. Best case scenario, you spend years fighting charges and drain your savings on legal fees. Worst case, you go to prison alongside the Morettis. Those are terrible options. Yes, they are. Patricia's voice gentled. But only one of them gives you a future. I know it feels like betrayal, but Lucien made choices that put you here. You don't owe him your life in return. Selena's phone buzzed. Message from Dante. We need to talk. Not about Lucien, about you, the parking garage, level 3, come alone. She showed the message to Patricia, who immediately shook her head. Absolutely not. That's how people disappear. He's not going to hurt me. Whatever else Dante is, he's pragmatic. Hurting me now would only make things worse. You don't know that. I'm going. You can wait in the car or come with me, but I'm going. Patricia muttered something about stubborn clients and followed her to level 3. They found Dante leaning against a black sedan, looking exactly as composed as someone who hadn't just watched his nephew's life implode should not look. Miss Vale? Thank you for coming. What do you want? To make you an offer. Dante straightened, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual menace. The FBI is building a case. You're caught in the middle. Lucien is telling you to cooperate, which is noble but stupid. And you're going to tell me not to cooperate? I'm going to tell you there's a third option, one that doesn't involve prison or testifying against the man you claim to love. Selena's pulse jumped. I'm listening. The money in those offshore accounts? It's clean. Transferred from legitimate businesses Lucien set up over the past year. The FBI thinks it's laundered because they don't understand how he restructured our family's holdings. But with proper documentation, a good accounting firm, and the right legal team, we can prove those transfers were legal. And the FBI will just accept that? The FBI will be forced to accept it when confronted with evidence they can't refute. But it requires you to stop cooperating with their investigation. It requires you to trust me. Patricia stepped forward. This is insane. You're asking her to obstruct a federal investigation. I'm offering her a way to protect both herself and Lucien. The FBI wants scalps. They want to parade Moretti family members in front of cameras and claim victory over organized crime. But if they can't make the money laundering charges stick, if their star witness refuses to cooperate, their case gets significantly weaker. Selena's head was spinning. Why would you help me? You threatened to destroy my career if I didn't walk away from Lucien. Because my nephew loves you. And despite my better judgment, I've come to respect that. He's never cared about anything the way he cares about you. That kind of devotion is rare in our world. Valuable. Dante's expression softened fractionally. I failed him when he needed me to support his exit. The least I can do now is make sure the woman he loves doesn't end up in prison for his mistakes. This is a trap, Patricia said flatly. This is an olive branch. A chance for Miss Vale to walk away from this mess without becoming a federal informant or a convicted felon. Dante pulled an envelope from his jacket. Inside are account records showing the legitimate source of every dollar in those offshore accounts. Documentation Lucien prepared but never had time to share before the shooting. Give these to your lawyer. Let her verify their authenticity, and then decide. He handed Selena the envelope and walked away before she could respond. Patricia grabbed it immediately, ripping it open to scan the contents. Her expression shifted from skeptical to confused to something close to hope. These look real, she said slowly. If they are, they could change everything. But they came from Dante Moretti, a man who has every reason to manipulate you into protecting his family. We'd need independent verification, forensic accounting, probably weeks of investigation to confirm authenticity, which the FBI won't give us time for. No, they want your cooperation statement by tomorrow. Selena stared at the documents in Patricia's hands, feeling the weight of choices that would define the rest of her life. Cooperate with the FBI and send Lucien to prison. Trust Dante's evidence and risk everything on documents that might be fabricated. Or refuse to choose and let the federal justice system devour her whole. Her phone buzzed again. Lucien, whatever my uncle offered you, don't take it. He's trying to protect the family, not you. Please trust the FBI. Please save yourself. Another message, this one from Dante. My nephew is noble, but nobility doesn't win against federal prosecutors. Think pragmatically, Miss Vale. Think survival. She stood in the hospital parking garage, caught between the man who'd put her name on offshore accounts without permission and the uncle who'd threatened to destroy her career. Between FBI agents offering immunity and lawyers suggesting fraud. And for the first time since meeting Lucien Moretti at a museum gala 3 months ago, Selena Vale had no idea which damaged thing was worth trying to save. Selena made her decision at 3 a.m, sitting in her apartment with the offshore account documents spread across her kitchen table like tarot cards predicting disaster. She'd spent 6 hours with Patricia going through every page, every transaction record, every piece of evidence Dante had provided. And the terrible truth was this: the documents looked legitimate. Every dollar traced back to businesses Lucien had built over the past 18 months. Art galleries in Seattle, restaurants in Portland, technology investments in San Francisco. Clean money, legally earned, carefully documented. If Dante's evidence was authentic, the FBI's money laundering case evaporated. But that was a big if. Patricia had warned her a dozen times. Documents could be forged, financial records manipulated. Dante Moretti had decades of experience making illegal operations look legitimate. Trusting him was insane. Yet Lucien was telling her to cooperate with the FBI, to throw him to the wolves, to save herself at his expense. And that felt wrong too. Not because she wanted to protect him. Part of her was still furious about the offshore accounts, but because informing on someone to save yourself was a choice that would define her for the rest of her life. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Agent Chen. I need more time. 48 hours isn't enough to make this decision. The response came within minutes, despite the hour. You have until Friday at noon. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. Choose wisely. Friday was 2 days away. Selena closed her eyes and tried to imagine both futures. In one, she cooperated with the FBI, testified against Lucien, watched him go to prison while she walked away with immunity and a destroyed conscience. In the other, she trusted Dante's evidence, fought the charges, and risked everything on documents that might be elaborate forgeries. There was a third option, one she'd been avoiding because it was the most terrifying. She could confront the truth herself, stop relying on lawyers and FBI agents and manipulative uncles, actually investigate whether the money was clean or laundered, find the source herself and make her decision based on facts instead of fear. The idea was probably stupid, definitely dangerous. She had no training in financial forensics, no access to banking records, no legal authority to investigate anything. But she had something else. She had the name of every business on those transfer records. She had addresses. She had the ability to show up unannounced and see what was real versus what was performance. Selena grabbed her laptop and started researching. The first business on the list was an art gallery in Seattle called Vale and Moretti Fine Arts. The name made her stomach twist. He'd named it after both of them, apparently planning this long before the warehouse shooting. The gallery's website looked professional. Contemporary artists, rotating exhibitions, a physical address in Pioneer Square. She booked a flight for 6 a.m. Patricia called while Selena was throwing clothes into an overnight bag. Please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing. I'm going to Seattle to verify Dante's evidence. That's insane. You're not an investigator. You don't have legal authority to access business records. And if Dante's people are monitoring you, which they almost certainly are, you're walking straight into whatever trap he's set. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only person who can actually determine if Lucien was telling the truth about building legitimate businesses. Selena zipped the bag closed. I can't make this decision blind, Patricia. I need to see for myself. Then let me come with you. No. If this goes badly, I don't want you implicated. She softened her tone. But I'll call you every 4 hours. If you don't hear from me, assume something's wrong and contact the FBI. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You're in love with him. That's clouding your judgment. Probably, but I'm going anyway. She hung up before Patricia could argue further and headed for the airport. The flight to Seattle was turbulent, winter storms battering the plane while Selena sat gripping her armrests and trying not to interpret the weather as an omen. She landed at 9:30 Pacific time, rented a car, and drove straight to Pioneer Square. Vale and Moretti Fine Arts occupied a converted warehouse space with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. Through the glass, Selena could see paintings hung on white walls, track lighting casting perfect illumination, a reception desk where a young woman sat typing on a laptop. It looked real, felt real. Nothing about it screamed money laundering front. Selena pushed through the door. A bell chimed. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she saw Selena's expression. Can I help you? I'm looking for the owner. Is there someone I can speak with about the gallery's operations? Mr. Chen is in the back. Let me check if he's available. The receptionist disappeared through a door marked private. Selena used the time to examine the gallery more closely. The paintings were real. She recognized several artists whose work she'd seen in New York galleries. Price tags ranged from affordable to expensive, but not outrageous. Sales records were posted on a corkboard near the desk, suggesting genuine transactions. A man emerged from his back office.
Mid-40s, kind eyes, wearing jeans and a paint-stained shirt. "I'm David Chen. Sarah said you had questions about the gallery?" Selena's prepared speech evaporated. She stood there trying to figure out how to ask, "Is this business a front for money laundering?" without sounding completely insane. "I'm Selena Vale. My name is on the gallery's title." David's expression shifted to recognition. "Oh, yes, Lucien mentioned you might visit someday. I'm sorry, I should have realized. You're the art restoration specialist from New York. You know who I am? Lucien talks about you constantly, sends photos of paintings you're working on, asks my opinion on conservation techniques." David gestured toward his office. "Please, come back. I'll show you the books." She followed him into a cluttered space filled with art catalogs, framing samples, and a desk buried under paperwork. David pulled out a leather binder and handed it to her. "Complete financial records for the past 18 months. Every sale, every purchase, every operating expense." Lucien insisted on total transparency. He sat on the edge of his desk. He said someday someone might question whether this gallery was legitimate. He wanted to make sure I could prove it was real. Selena opened the binder with shaking hands. Inside were invoices, receipts, tax returns, banking statements. Everything documented, cross-referenced, exactly the kind of meticulous record-keeping that genuine businesses maintained. "How did you meet Lucien?" she asked. "Art school. We were classmates at Yale before he had to leave because of his father. We stayed in touch. When he reached out last year about funding a gallery, I thought he was joking." David's smile was fond, sad. But he was serious. Said he wanted to build something clean, something that mattered. He gave me startup capital and complete creative control. The only condition was that I run it like a real business, not some vanity project. "And it's profitable?" "Breaking even, which for a new gallery is actually good. We're building a client base, getting featured in local art publications, developing relationships with emerging artists. It's real, Miss Vale. Every part of it." Selena felt tears burning. "Can I see the other businesses? The restaurant? The tech investments?" David pulled out his phone. "I can do better than that. I can introduce you to the other owners. We're all part of what Lucien called his exit network. People he trusted to build legitimate operations while he extracted himself from his family's business." Within an hour, Selena was sitting in a restaurant called Moretti's Table with 3 other people. A chef named Maria, who'd opened the restaurant with Lucien's funding, a software engineer named James, whose startup Lucien had invested in, and a woman named Rachel, who ran a nonprofit helping at-risk youth. They all told similar stories. Lucien reaching out, offering capital, asking only that they build something genuine, something he could point to as evidence he was more than his father's legacy. "He's dying to get out," Maria said over coffee that was probably excellent but tasted like ash in Selena's mouth. "You can see it every time he visits. He looks at what we're building, and it's like he's remembering who he wanted to be before his father's death trapped him." "Does he talk about the other business, the family operations?" Selena asked carefully. "Never directly, but you can tell it's killing him, the weight of it." Rachel leaned forward. "He asked me once if I thought redemption was possible, if someone born into violence could ever wash the blood off their hands. I told him blood doesn't wash off, it just becomes part of your story. The question is what you build afterward." James nodded. "He's building, Miss Vale, for real. These businesses aren't fronts or tax shelters. They're his proof that he's trying." Selena spent the rest of the day visiting every business on Dante's documentation. Every single one was real, legitimate. Exactly what Lucien had claimed he was building during those Thursday afternoon visits to her lab. The money was clean, which meant the FBI's case against her would collapse if she could prove it, which meant she didn't have to choose between cooperation and prison. She could fight the charges with evidence, walk away from this nightmare without destroying Lucien in the process. She called Patricia from her hotel room that night. "The businesses are real, all of them. I met the owners, examined the records, verified transactions. Dante was telling the truth about the money being clean." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Are you certain, absolutely certain these people weren't coached to tell you what Dante wanted you to hear?" "I'm certain they're running real businesses. Whether Dante coached them about what to say to me is irrelevant if the financial records hold up to forensic accounting." "Then we take this to the FBI, show them the evidence, force them to verify the transfers were legitimate." And Lucien still faces charges related to his family's operations,
But the money laundering case against you disappears. Patricia's voice gentled. You don't have to sacrifice yourself, Selena. You can walk away clean. But walking away clean meant leaving Lucien to face the FBI alone. Meant watching him go to prison for trying to build an exit that turned into a nightmare. Meant choosing her survival over the man who'd taken bullets protecting someone else's kid. I need to talk to him first, Selena said. Bad idea. Everything about this situation is a bad idea. But I need to hear what he wants me to do now that we know the money is clean. She booked a red-eye flight back to New York and went straight to the hospital from the airport. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gray and gold. Lucien was awake when she arrived, staring at the ceiling with an expression that suggested he hadn't slept. He turned when she entered. You went to Seattle. Not a question. Selena nodded, too exhausted for pretense. I met David Chen, Maria, James, and Rachel. I saw every business you built. And? They're real, Lucien, all of it. The money is clean. She moved closer to the bed. Dante was telling the truth. We can prove the offshore accounts hold legitimate funds. The FBI's money laundering case disappears. Relief flashed across his face, followed immediately by something darker. That's good. You'll be safe. We'll both be safe. The evidence clears both of us. No, he said it flatly, definitively. It clears you. I'm still implicated in everything else. The territory transfers, the distributor meetings, the systematic dismantling of criminal operations. The FBI will pivot from money laundering to conspiracy, racketeering, any charge they can make stick. Then we fight those too. There's nothing to fight. I did those things. I met with distributors to transfer drug territories. I paid people to walk away from criminal operations. I systematically dismantled my father's empire in ways that probably violated a dozen federal laws. He met her eyes. The exit was never going to be completely clean, Selena. I knew that. I just hoped I'd have more time before it caught up with me. She sat in the chair beside his bed, the same one she'd occupied during his surgery recovery. So what do you want me to do? Cooperate with the FBI? Tell them everything? No. Use Dante's evidence to clear yourself. Then walk away. Forget you ever met me. Stop saying that. Stop acting like you're disposable. I'm not disposable. I'm realistic. My choices put you in danger. The least I can do is make sure you survive those choices. His hand reached for hers, and this time she let him take it. I love you. That means protecting you even when protection looks like pushing you away. That's not love. That's martyrdom. Maybe I don't know the difference. Before Selena could respond, the door opened. Dante walked in, looking grimmer than she'd ever seen him. He took in the scene, Selena and Lucien, hands linked, exhaustion and desperation painted across both their faces. We have a problem, Dante said without preamble. Lucien's grip on Selena's hand tightened. What kind of problem? The FBI is moving faster than expected. They're planning to arrest multiple family members tomorrow morning. You're on the list. Dante's expression was carved from stone. They know about the Seattle businesses. They know the money is clean, so they're pivoting to the territory transfers and building a RICO case based on your systematic involvement in criminal operations. How do you know this? I still have people inside law enforcement. They gave me advance warning. Dante turned to Selena. They're also planning to arrest you as a material witness, hold you until you agree to cooperate or until trial, whichever comes first. The air went out of Selena's lungs. They can't do that. I haven't committed any crimes. They can hold material witnesses if they believe you'll flee or refuse to testify. And given that you've been romantically involved with their primary target, they absolutely believe that. Dante pulled an envelope from his jacket, which is why I'm offering you both a different option. What option? Lucien's voice had gone cold, dangerous. More manipulation disguised as protection? Escape. Tonight, before the arrests happen. Dante set the envelope on the bedside table. Inside are new identities, travel documents, account information for funds that can't be traced. Enough to disappear completely and build new lives somewhere the FBI won't find you. Selena stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You're asking us to run. I'm giving you a choice. Stay and face federal prosecution that will destroy you both, or disappear and actually get the clean exit Lucien's been working toward for 18 months. He can't travel. He was shot 4 days ago. Which is why we leave tonight while he can still move before the arrests make it impossible. Dante's eyes moved to Lucian. I failed you when you needed me to support your exit. I let family loyalty override what was right. This is me fixing that mistake. Take the documents. Disappear. Live the life you were trying to build. Lucian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. What about the people who helped me? David, Maria, James, Rachel. They'll be investigated, harassed, possibly charged as accessories. They'll be fine. The businesses are legitimate. They have documentation proving they weren't involved in family operations. The FBI might investigate, but they won't find anything actionable. Dante moved closer to the bed. But you and Miss Vale? You won't be fine. You'll spend years fighting charges, draining your resources, watching your lives get dissected in federal court. This is the only way out that doesn't end in prison. Selena's head was spinning. This is insane. We can't just disappear. I have a career, a life, responsibilities, all of which end tomorrow when the FBI arrests you. Dante cut through her protests with brutal honesty. You want to save Lucian? This is how. You want to save yourself? This is how. Take the documents and run, or stay and let the federal justice system devour you both. I need to think. You have 2 hours. After that, I can't guarantee safe passage. Dante headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Vale, my nephew loves you more than he's ever loved anything, including his own survival. That's rare. Don't waste it on martyrdom. He left, and the envelope sat on the bedside table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Selena picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were passports with their photos but different names. Michael and Sarah Chen. Bank account numbers. Property deeds for a house in Vancouver. Detailed instructions for crossing the Canadian border without triggering alerts. It was comprehensive, professional, the kind of escape plan that required months of preparation and resources she couldn't begin to imagine. He's been planning this, Lucienne said quietly. Probably since the warehouse shooting, maybe longer. Can we trust it? Dante is many things, but he doesn't set traps this elaborate. If he wanted us caught, he'd just tip off the FBI. Lucien's fingers traced the passport edge. But using this means abandoning everything. Your career, your apartment, your life. It means becoming fugitives. We'd be fugitives anyway after tomorrow's arrests. No, you'd be a defendant fighting charges. That's different from fleeing prosecution. He set the passport down carefully. I can't ask you to do this. Can't ask you to give up your entire life because I made mistakes that caught up with me. Selena looked at him, pale, injured, exhausted from fighting battles that had started long before she'd met him. She thought about the Renaissance painting waiting in her lab, about Sarah and Jacob Bernstein sacrificing everything to escape, about Rebecca at 87 getting back something her family had lost. Sometimes survival required abandoning what you'd built and starting over. I'm not asking your permission, she said. I'm making a choice, and I choose you. Selena, don't. Don't try to talk me out of this. I've spent the last 4 days weighing options, listening to lawyers and FBI agents and your uncle tell me what I should do. Now I'm deciding for myself. She took his hand. We use Dante's plan. We disappear. We build the life you were trying to create before the shooting forced everything to move faster than you'd planned. You'll lose everything. I'll lose everything anyway. At least this way I choose what I'm running toward instead of what I'm running from. She squeezed his hand. But I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. Is this what you want? Or are you going to spend the rest of our lives resenting me for making you run? Lucian was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then he pulled her closer, careful of his injuries, and kissed her with desperate intensity. I want you, he whispered against her mouth. I want a life that isn't measured in federal indictments and family obligations. I want to wake up in Vancouver or Seattle or anywhere that isn't New York and build something real with you. That's what I want. Then we do it. Tonight. Tonight. They spent the next hour making plans. Lucienne called Dante, who arrived with a doctor willing to discharge him against medical advice and enough pain medication to make travel possible. Selena went back to her apartment one final time, packed a single bag with essentials, and stood in her kitchen trying to memorize what her life had looked like before it inverted. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. Please tell me you're not doing something catastrophically stupid. Selena typed a response with shaking hands. I'm sorry. Thank you for everything. Don't try to contact me after tonight. She deleted Patricia's number, wiped her phone, and left it on the kitchen counter. Michael and Sarah Chen didn't need phones that could be traced. The extraction happened at midnight. Dante had arranged a private medical transport, legitimate enough to avoid suspicion, equipped enough to handle Lucian's injuries. They drove to a small airfield in New Jersey where a chartered plane waited. No passenger manifest, no flight plan that would trigger alerts. Selena helped Lucian aboard, her hands steady, despite the terror clawing up her throat. This was real. They were actually doing this, leaving everything behind and betting their futures on forged documents and Dante's word. The plane lifted off at 1:15 a.m. Through the window, Selena watched New York's lights recede into darkness. Somewhere below, the FBI was preparing arrest warrants. Patricia was probably panicking. Marcus was going to be devastated. Rebecca Bernstein would never get her family's painting back. That thought hit harder than the others. Selena closed her eyes against tears. The Renaissance portrait was still in her lab, 90% restored, waiting for final varnish work before being returned to its rightful owner. I didn't finish the painting, she whispered. Lucian's hand found hers in the dark cabin. I know. I'm sorry. She was going to get it back. Your grandfather's theft was finally going to be made right. We'll find another way. Send it anonymously, have David deliver it, something. Rebecca will get the painting. His voice was rough with pain and medication. But you had to choose between finishing that restoration and saving yourself. You chose survival. That's not wrong. It feels wrong. I know. They flew through the night while Lucian drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication fighting the agony of traveling 4 days after being shot. Selena sat beside him, monitoring his breathing, checking for fever, praying the gunshot wounds wouldn't develop complications before they reached Canada. The plane landed at a private airfield outside Vancouver at 4 a.m. Pacific time. Dante had arranged everything, a car waiting, a doctor ready to check Lucian's wounds, the house he'd mentioned already furnished and stocked. It should have felt like victory, like escape. Instead, it felt like exile. They reached the house as dawn broke over Vancouver's mountains. It was beautiful, modern, isolated, with views of water and forest. The kind of place you'd choose for a fresh start if fresh starts weren't code for running from federal prosecution. The doctor examined Lucian, changed his dressings, left stronger antibiotics and warnings about infection. Selena helped him into bed, and then stood at the window watching light spread across an unfamiliar landscape. Her phone, the new one Dante had provided, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You made it. Good. Destroy this phone after reading. The FBI will be looking for you by noon. Stay hidden for at least 6 months before attempting any contact with your former life. D. She deleted the message and stared at the device in her hand. This phone contained 3 contacts: Dante, the doctor, and emergency services. That was her entire world now. 3 phone numbers and a man recovering from gunshot wounds in a bedroom behind her. Selena? Lucien's voice rough with exhaustion. Come here. She returned to the bedroom. He'd propped himself up slightly, gray eyes tracking her movement with concern. You're crying. I just gave up everything for you. I'm allowed to cry. You're allowed to regret it too. Allowed to hate me for putting you in a position where running felt like the only option. She sat on the edge of the bed. I don't hate you. I'm terrified and mourning my old life and wondering if we just made the worst mistake imaginable. But I don't hate you. That's something. Is it enough? I don't know. He reached for her hand. But we have time to find out. Years, maybe. Decades, if we're lucky. Time to figure out if love is enough to build a life on when everything else has been stripped away. Selena lay down carefully beside him, mindful of his injuries. Outside, Vancouver was waking up. Somewhere in New York, the FBI was executing arrest warrants and discovering their targets had vanished. Marcus was probably staring at her empty lab in devastation. Patricia was fielding questions she couldn't answer. And Selena Volunavale, art restorer, daughter of teachers from Ohio, a woman who'd spent 15 years learning to fix broken things, was gone. Erased. Replaced by Sarah Chen, a fugitive with a forged passport and a future built on running. Tell me we did the right thing, she whispered. Lucian's arm wrapped around her carefully. I can't. I don't know if there was a right thing, just choices with different consequences. Very comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to survive with you, to build whatever comes next. His voice was fading, medication pulling him toward sleep. We'll figure it out, Selena, day by day. One choice at a time. That's all anyone can do. He slipped into unconsciousness, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the weight of irreversible decisions. Through the window, mountains stood silent and indifferent. The sun climbed higher, warming a landscape that didn't know or care about federal investigations and abandoned lives. Selena closed her eyes and tried to imagine a future where this choice made sense, where running had been survival instead of cowardice, where love was enough to justify everything they'd sacrificed. She couldn't quite see it yet, but somewhere between the wreckage of who they'd been and the uncertainty of who they'd become, she felt the first fragile stirrings of something that might eventually become hope, if they survived long enough to let it grow. The first 3 months in Vancouver were survival, not living. Lucien's wounds healed slowly, infection setting in twice despite antibiotics, leaving him weak and hollow-eyed through April's rain. Selena learned to change dressings, monitor fever, measure out medication with hands that had once restored Renaissance masterpieces and now kept a fugitive alive. They didn't talk much during those early weeks. What was there to say? They'd burned their lives to the ground and fled to a country where neither of them had roots or history. Conversation felt like acknowledging the magnitude of what they'd done, and neither was ready for that reckoning yet. Instead, they existed in careful silence. Selena cooked meals from recipes she found online, learning to navigate Canadian grocery stores and currency. Lucien slept 16 hours a day, his body rebuilding itself cell by cell. When he was awake, he sat by the window watching mountains and water, expression unreadable. Sometimes Selena caught him staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. The house Dante had arranged was comfortable but sterile. Modern furniture, neutral colors, nothing personal or distinctive. It felt like a stage set for people playing at normal life. They were Michael and Sarah Chen on paper, but in practice they were ghosts haunting a space that would never be home. By May, Lucien could walk without grimacing. His physical therapist, a woman named Dr. Kowalski, who asked no questions about the gunshot scars, declared him healed enough to resume normal activities, whatever normal meant for fugitives with forged identities. "What do you want to do?" Selena asked one morning, over coffee that tasted wrong because everything in Canada tasted slightly wrong, like her palate was still calibrated to New York. Lucien looked up from the newspaper he'd been staring at without reading. "About what?" "About life. We can't just sit in this house forever waiting for the FBI to find us." "Why not?" "Because that's not living. That's just slow-motion surrender." He set down the newspaper carefully. "What would you suggest? We can't use our real names, can't pursue our actual careers, can't contact anyone from our previous lives. What kind of existence is that? The one we chose when we got on that plane. You chose it. I gave you an out multiple times." "Don't," Selena's voice went sharp. "Don't rewrite history to make yourself the martyr. I chose this with full knowledge of what I was sacrificing, but choosing to run doesn't mean choosing to stop existing." "Then what does it mean?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to figure it out before I lose my mind." They stared at each other across the kitchen table, tension crackling between them. This was their first real fight since Vancouver, and part of Selena welcomed it. Anger felt more alive than the numb acceptance they'd been living in. Lucien's jaw tightened. "Fine. What do you propose?" "We do what you were planning before the shooting forced everything to accelerate. We build something, not in our real names, not connected to our past, but something that matters. Something that proves we're more than just people hiding from consequences." "Using what credentials? What resources?" "Dante gave us enough money to survive, not enough to build a new life." "Then we start small. I can restore paintings under a pseudonym. You know art history. You could consult for galleries, teach if you wanted. We find ways to use our actual skills without exposing who we really are." "That's incredibly risky." "Everything about our situation is risky. At least this way we're choosing the risk instead of letting it choose us." Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. "You want to restore paintings again. I want to do something with my hands besides change bandages and cook meals. I want to remember what it felt like to care about something beyond survival." "The Renaissance painting." You're thinking about the one you didn't finish. It wasn't a question. Selena nodded, feeling tears threaten. Rebecca Bernstein is 87 years old. Every day that passes is another day she doesn't get her family's painting back. And I left it sitting in my lab, 90% restored, because I chose you over finishing what I started. You chose survival. I chose you. Don't diminish that by calling it something else. She wiped her eyes roughly. But I need to find a way to finish what I started. Not that specific painting. I accept that's gone now, but the work, the purpose, the feeling that what I do matters. Lucy Sien stood slowly, moved around the table, and pulled her into his arms. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact since they'd arrived in Vancouver. Selena leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her ear. Okay, he said quietly. We build something, carefully, slowly, but we try. That conversation became their turning point. Within a week, Selena had found a small conservation studio willing to hire her for freelance work under the name Sarah Chen. The owner, a woman named Margaret Liu, asked no questions about why Sarah had no Canadian credentials but could examine a 17th century landscape and identify restoration work from 3 different time periods. I care about skill, not paperwork, Margaret said simply. You're good at this. That's all that matters to me. The first time Selena sat at a workbench with proper lighting and conservation tools, she cried. Not delicate tears, but ugly, shaking sobs that embarrassed her until Margaret wordlessly handed her a box of tissues and left her alone to grieve. Because this wasn't her lab in New York. These weren't her tools, her paintings, her carefully cultivated career. This was a borrowed identity doing borrowed work in a borrowed life. But it was something, and something felt better than the nothing she'd been living in. Lucian found work teaching art history at a community college under the name Michael Chen. The irony of using his Yale education, the degree he'd abandoned when his father died, wasn't lost on either of them. But watching him prepare lectures, seeing him engage with students who had no idea they were learning from a former crime family heir, Selena caught glimpses of who he might have been if his father's heart attack had never happened. Summer arrived, turning Vancouver green and warm. They developed routines. Morning coffee while reading Canadian newspapers that felt surreal in their normalcy. Work during the day. Selena at the conservation studio, Lucian at the college. Evenings cooking together, learning to exist in the same space without the desperate intensity that had defined their early relationship. They were building something. Fragile, imperfect, but real. Then August brought the letter. It arrived at the house, addressed to Michael Chen. No return address, postmarked from New York. Selena's hand shook as she opened it, terrified it was from the FBI, some elaborate trap to confirm their location. Instead, she found a single page in handwriting she didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Rebecca Bernstein. Your Uncle Dante visited me 3 months ago with an extraordinary gift, a painting that belonged to my family before the war. He said it was restored by a woman named Selena Vale, and that you had commissioned the work before circumstances forced you to leave the country. I don't know what those circumstances were, and I'm not asking. But I wanted you to know that receiving this painting after 70 years was one of the most profound moments of my life. Seeing my mother's face in the portrait, remembering our apartment in Paris, feeling connected to a past I thought was lost forever, there are no words adequate to express my gratitude. Mr. Dante said you and Miss Vale had to leave before you could deliver the painting yourselves. He said you would want to know it reached me safely, so I'm writing to tell you it did. More than that, it brought my family peace we didn't know we were missing. My daughter hung it in her home. My grandson, who never knew his great-grandparents, now sees them every day. That's because of you and Miss Vale, because you cared enough to return what was stolen. I'm told Miss Vale never finished the final varnishing. I want you to know the painting is beautiful regardless, perfect in its slight imperfection. A reminder that some things don't need to be completely finished to be valuable. Thank you for giving my family back a piece of our history. I pray you and Miss Vale find peace wherever you've gone. With deepest gratitude, Rebecca Bernstein. Selena read the letter 3 times before her vision blurred too badly to continue. Lucian found her sitting on the floor, letter clutched in shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. What happened? Is it the FBI? She handed him the letter wordlessly. watched his expression shift as he read. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like grief and relief tangled together. Dante delivered it, he said quietly. He finished what we started.
He said he would find a way. I didn't believe him. Neither did I. Lucian sat beside her on the floor, both of them leaning against the wall like the weight of Rebecca's gratitude required physical support. She has the painting. After 70 years, she has it back. I didn't finish the varnishing. She says it's perfect anyway.
Selena laughed through tears.
She's being kind. The varnish protects the paint layer, stabilizes the restoration work.
Without it, the painting is vulnerable to environmental damage. Or maybe she understands that some things are valuable because of what they represent, not because they're technically perfect. Lucienne's arm wrapped around her shoulders. We did that, Selena. We took something stolen and gave it back. That matters. Does it balance what we did afterward? Running from the FBI? Abandoning our responsibilities? I don't know. Maybe there is no balance. Maybe we just live with both truths. We did something right, and we did something desperate, and we have to carry both. They sat on the floor holding each other while summer sunlight streamed through windows of a house that still didn't feel like home. But Rebecca's letter had shifted something, proof that their actions before the collapse had mattered, that the exit Lucian had been building wasn't entirely fantasy, that redemption, even incomplete, was possible. Fall arrived with Vancouver's famous rain. Selena's work at the conservation studio expanded. Margaret trusted her with increasingly important pieces, never questioning why Sarah Chen's techniques showed training from institutions she couldn't have attended. Lucien's classes filled with students who appreciated his passion for Renaissance art, unaware they were learning from someone who'd spent years trying to escape his family's legacy. They were building a life. Not the one they'd planned, not the one they'd lost, but something that resembled existence with purpose. Then November brought the second letter. This one was from Patricia, forwarded through a chain of anonymous remailers that probably cost a fortune to arrange. The message was brief, clinical, exactly what Selena would expect from a lawyer communicating with a fugitive client, Estes. The FBI closed their investigation. Insufficient evidence for RICO charges after their primary witnesses refused cooperation. Dante Moretti has retired from family operations. The Moretti organization is being absorbed by rival families, exactly what Lucienne was trying to prevent. Your lab was cleared out. Marcus saved what he could of your personal items. He asks about you sometimes. I tell him I don't know where you are. That's true now. I'm sending this blind, hoping it reaches you. The offshore account charges were dropped after forensic accounting confirmed the funds were legitimate. You're no longer wanted for questioning, but you're also not officially cleared. The investigation is suspended, not closed. Coming back would be complicated, possibly dangerous. I don't know if that matters to you anymore, but I thought you deserved to know. Stay safe. P. Selena read the letter to Lucien over dinner. He listened without interrupting, expression carefully neutral, but she saw his hands tighten around his fork. The investigation is suspended, he said finally. That means we could come back. It means we could try. It doesn't mean we'd succeed without getting arrested for fleeing prosecution. But the charges were dropped. The money laundering charges, not the material witness detention, not the questions about why we ran. Selena set the letter aside. Patricia's right. Coming back would be complicated. Do you want to come back? The question hung between them. Selena looked around their kitchen, furnished with items they'd chosen together, marked by 6 months of building something from nothing. Out the window, Vancouver's lights reflected off rain-slicked streets. I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me misses New York every single day. Misses my lab, my work, the life I built. But that life doesn't exist anymore, even if we went back. I'm not the person who left. Neither are you. We could be someone new there. Start over with our real names. Could we? Or would we spend every day waiting for the FBI to change their minds? Looking over our shoulders, wondering if the investigation would reopen. She met his eyes. I didn't run from New York to spend the rest of my life afraid of going back. Then what do you want? I want to stop running. Actually, stop. Not physically. I know we're stuck in Vancouver for the foreseeable future, but mentally, emotionally, I want to stop living like fugitives and start living like people who chose a different path.
Lucien was quiet for a long time. That requires accepting we're never going back. Yes. Accepting everything we left is gone. Our old identities, our careers, the people we were. Yes. Can you do that? Can you let go of Selena Vale completely? She thought about the question seriously, about the woman who'd restored paintings in a museum lab, who'd fallen for a dangerous man at a gala, who'd chosen love over safety and survival over martyrdom. That woman was gone, had died the moment they'd boarded a plane to Vancouver. But Sarah Chen, art conservator, partner to a community college professor, a woman building a quiet life in a city that asked no questions about her past, that woman was still being created, still being discovered. And maybe that was enough. I already have, Selena said quietly. The moment I got on that plane, I let her go. I've been grieving her for 6 months. But grief doesn't mean I want her back. It just means I'm acknowledging what I lost. And what did you gain? You. A chance to build something without federal investigations and family obligations. Freedom from constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when your world would collapse and take me with it. She reached across the table, took his hand. I gained a future that's uncertain, but mine. Ours. That's worth something. Lucien's fingers laced through hers. I spent so long trying to escape my father's legacy, trying to become someone he wasn't. But maybe that was the wrong goal. Maybe the point isn't escaping who you were, it's deciding who you become afterward. Very philosophical for someone who teaches Renaissance art history. The Renaissance was all about rebirth. Seems relevant. They smiled at each other across the table, and for the first time since fleeing New York, Selena felt something that might eventually become contentment, not happiness. That seemed too ambitious given everything they'd sacrificed, but contentment, acceptance, the quiet acknowledgement that this life, however imperfect, was theirs. Winter settled over Vancouver. Selena worked on a damaged Monet that Margaret's studio had acquired, water damage similar to the Renaissance painting she'd restored for Lucien, requiring the same careful attention to removing stains without destroying original paint. The work consumed her in ways that felt almost meditative. Hours would pass while she gently cleaned centuries of accumulated grime, revealing colors the artist had intended. One afternoon in January, Margaret found her crying over the Monet. "What's wrong? Did something happen to the painting?" Selena wiped her eyes. "No, the painting is fine. Better than fine. I just revealed the signature underneath the water damage. It's authentic Monet, not a copy like we'd thought." "Then why are you crying?" "Because I love this work. I love bringing damaged things back to life. And I spent 6 months thinking I'd lost the ability to care about anything except survival." She looked at Margaret with something like desperation. "Does that make sense?" Margaret sat on the edge of the workbench. "My husband and I left Hong Kong 20 years ago. Political reasons I won't bore you with. But I remember the first time I realized I could still care about art restoration, even though I'd lost everything else. It felt like being human again after months of just existing." "That's exactly it. You're good at hiding whatever you're running from, Sarah. I don't ask because it's not my business, but I recognize the look of someone who's lost more than they can talk about." Margaret's voice was gentle. "Whatever you're carrying, it doesn't have to define you. You get to decide who you become afterward." The words echoed what Lucien had said months ago. Maybe that was the lesson they were both learning, that identity wasn't fixed, wasn't determined by where you came from or what you'd lost. It was created daily through choices and actions and the slow accumulation of new memories. That evening, Selena came home to find Lucien cooking dinner and humming. Actually humming. She couldn't remember the last time she'd heard him make any sound that resembled joy. "Someone's in a good mood." He looked up from the stove. "One of my students got accepted to an art history graduate program. She came to my office crying, saying I'd inspired her to pursue it seriously, that I'd made her believe she could make a career out of loving beautiful things." "That's wonderful. It made me realize something." He turned down the heat, moved toward her. "I've spent my entire adult life convinced I couldn't make a difference, that my father's legacy was too heavy to overcome, that violence and crime were my inheritance whether I wanted them or not. And now? Now I think maybe the difference I make doesn't have to be grand. Maybe it's just one student at a time, one restored painting, one choice to be better than what I was designed to be." His hands cupped her face.
You showed me that. At the museum gala, when you looked at me like I was worth saving. And every day since, when you've chosen to build this life with me instead of running back to something easier. Selena felt tears threatening again. She'd cried more in the past 8 months than in the previous 30 years combined. I'm not some noble savior. I'm just a woman who made questionable choices because I fell for a man who asked if broken things could be restored. And what's your answer now? After everything we've been through? She thought about Rebecca Bernstein's letter, about the Monet on her workbench revealing its true nature beneath water damage, about Lucien standing in their Vancouver kitchen cooking dinner and humming like someone who'd finally found peace. I think broken things can be stabilized, preserved, integrated into something new that acknowledges the damage while still having value. She kissed him softly. I think that's the best we can hope for. Not erasure, just acceptance. I can live with that? Good, because we're stuck with each other now. Spring returned, marking a full year since they'd fled New York. Selena had been promoted at the conservation studio. Margaret made her a partner, changing the business name to Liu and Chen Fine Art Conservation. The irony of having her assumed name on a business sign wasn't lost on her, but she accepted it as another marker of this new identity she was building. Lucien was offered a full-time position at the college. They wanted him to develop a new curriculum focused on art as cultural resistance, appropriate given his personal history, though his colleagues knew nothing about it. He accepted, working late nights to build syllabi that would have made his Yale professors proud. They bought a house, not the one Dante had arranged. That had always felt temporary, staged. This one was smaller, older, with a view of nothing spectacular but enough space for both of them to work from home. Selena set up a small conservation studio in the spare bedroom. Lucien filled the living room with books about Renaissance masters and contemporary artists, creating his own library divorced from the family collection he'd left behind. It was ordinary, aggressively, defiantly ordinary. 2 people with professional careers, a mortgage, neighbors who waved hello without knowing they were waving at fugitives. And slowly, incrementally, it started to feel like home. On the anniversary of their arrival in Vancouver, Lucien took Selena to a small gallery in Gastown. She'd been before. It featured emerging artists, mostly local, the kind of experimental work that museums wouldn't touch for another decade. They wandered through the exhibition holding hands, arguing good-naturedly about whether a particular sculpture was brilliant or pretentious. Then Lucien stopped in front of a painting that made Selena's breath catch. It was a portrait, contemporary style but with techniques that referenced Renaissance masters. A woman in profile, face turned toward light spilling through a window. The composition was eerily similar to the painting she'd restored for Lucien, the one now hanging in Rebecca Bernstein's daughter's home. This is by a local artist, Lucien said quietly, reading the placard. Sarah Nakamura. She says in her statement that she was inspired by a family story about a painting lost during World War II and miraculously returned. Says it made her think about what survives when everything else is destroyed. Selena moved closer to the painting. The technique was excellent. Layers of glaze creating depth, attention to light, and shadow that showed real understanding. This wasn't some amateur copying old masters. This was someone using classical techniques to say something new. Rebecca's grandson, she whispered. He must be Sarah Nakamura's husband or partner. He told her the story. Which means what we did mattered. Not just to Rebecca, but to the next generation. To an artist we've never met who's creating work inspired by our choice to return what was stolen. They stood before this painting for a long time, watching how light moved across the canvas, how the woman's profile suggested both loss and hope. Selena thought about the chain of events that had led here. Lucien's grandfather stealing a painting, Lucien commissioning its restoration, Selena falling for a dangerous man trying to be better, Dante delivering the finished work after they'd fled. All of it connected. All of it mattered. We did that, Lucien said, together, despite everything that came after, despite running and hiding and losing everything we thought we were. We did something that mattered enough to inspire someone else's art. Selena leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her back. Maybe that's what redemption actually looks like. Not some grand gesture that erases the past. Just small choices that ripple outward in ways you can't predict. Very philosophical for an art conservator. I learned it from a Renaissance art history professor who used to run a crime family.
He laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine and nothing like the hollow man who'd woken up in a hospital bed 9 months ago. They bought the painting, their first major purchase as Michael and Sarah Chen, and hung it in their living room where morning light would catch it, the same way light caught the woman's profile in the composition. Summer arrived again. 2 years since the warehouse shooting that had changed everything. Selena received a package at the conservation studio, forwarded through the same anonymous chain that had delivered Patricia's letter. Inside was a photograph and a brief note. The photograph showed Marcus standing in front of the Manhattan Museum of Antiquities beside a newly restored Caravaggio. He looked older, grayer, but his smile was genuine. The note was handwritten on museum letterhead. Selena, if you're really reading this, I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. I hope whatever you're running from was worth running toward something. The Caravaggio restoration is being credited to the museum's conservation department. I told them you'd trained our new lead restorer before you left. I couldn't let them erase you completely from our records. I still don't understand why you disappeared. The FBI won't tell me anything, but I trust that you had reasons. You always had reasons, even when I disagreed with them. Don't come back. Whatever investigation brought federal agents to my office asking about you, it's not worth the risk. Build something new wherever you are. You're good at that, building, restoring, making broken things whole. I miss you. We all do. M. Selena showed the note to Lucien that evening. He read it carefully, expression unreadable. You want to write back. I can't. It's too risky. But you want to. Of course I want to. Marcus was like a father to me. He mentored me, supported me, gave me opportunities I never would have gotten elsewhere. She took the note back, traced her fingers over the handwriting. But Sarah Chen can't write to Marcus Webb. Selena Vale is gone. Writing back means admitting she still exists somewhere, which puts both of us at risk. Maybe there's a middle ground. Like what? An anonymous donation to the museum's conservation department, in Marcus's name, large enough to fund new equipment and training, with a note that says something like, "An appreciation for a mentor who believed in restoration." Selena looked at him with wonder. That's either brilliant or dangerously sentimental. Can it be both? They made the donation through shell corporations and anonymous accounts. Lucien still had contacts who could move money without leaving traces. 3 months later, Selena found a news article about the Manhattan Museum of Antiquities receiving an unexpected endowment for their conservation department. Marcus was quoted saying it was one of the most meaningful gifts the museum had ever received. She hoped he understood. Hoped he knew somehow that wherever she'd gone, she remembered him with gratitude. Years passed. 3, then 4, then 5. The sharp edges of their former lives dulled into something that resembled nostalgia instead of grief. Selena built a reputation in Vancouver's art conservation community. Sarah Chen became known for her skill with damaged Renaissance works, her patient approach to restoration, her refusal to rush even when clients demanded speed. Lucien published papers under his assumed name, contributing to art history scholarship in ways that would have made his Yale professors proud. His students won awards, got into prestigious graduate programs, came back years later to thank him for changing their lives. They bought better furniture for their house, planted a garden, adopted a dog they named Turner after the British landscape painter, developed friendships with neighbors who knew them as Sarah and Michael, boring academics with boring lives. It was the most extraordinary, ordinary existence Selena had ever experienced. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival in Vancouver, they returned to the gallery where they'd bought Sarah Nakamura's painting. A new exhibition was opening. The artist had developed her Renaissance-inspired contemporary work into a full series exploring themes of loss and recovery. Sarah herself was there for the opening reception. She was younger than Selena expected, maybe late 20s, with an intensity that reminded Selena painfully of her younger self. When Sarah saw them examining her work, she approached with nervous energy. "You're Michael and Sarah Chen. You bought my first major piece." "We love it," Selena said honestly. "We see something new in it every day. That painting was special to me. It was inspired by my husband's grandmother. She got back a family heirloom after 70 years, a painting his great-grandparents lost during the war." Sarah's eyes were bright with passion. "The story made me think about what art means, not just as beautiful objects, but as connections to people we've lost, as evidence that love survives when everything else is destroyed." Lucien's hand found Selena's, squeezed gently. That's a beautiful interpretation.
The restoration specialist who brought the painting back did incredible work. I never got to meet her. Apparently she had to leave the country before it was delivered. But my husband's grandmother said it changed her life, gave her closure she didn't know she needed. I'm sure she'd be honored to know her work mattered that much, Selena said, voice rough with emotion she was trying to hide. They stayed at the gallery for hours, watching people engage with Sarah's work, seeing how one returned painting had rippled outward into an entire artistic career. When they finally left, walking through Vancouver streets now familiar as home, Lucien pulled Selena close. We did that. Our choice to return the painting created an artist who's now inspiring others. Rebecca did that by surviving, by keeping her family's stories alive long enough for them to matter again.
All of the above. He stopped under a streetlight, rain beginning to fall in the gentle way Vancouver rain usually fell. I need to tell you something. Selena's heart jumped. That sounds ominous. It's not. Or maybe it is. I don't know. He took a breath. Dante died 3 months ago. Heart attack, same as my father. I only found out because one of my old contacts tracked me down through an anonymous network. I'm sorry.
Don't be. We weren't close by the end, but he left something for us. A letter delivered through the same anonymous chain that brought Patricia's and Marcus's messages. What did it say? That he was proud of us for actually escaping, that he'd spent years trying to extract the family from criminal operations and failed, but watching us succeed gave him hope it was possible. Lucien's voice cracked slightly. He said the offshore accounts he set up for you, those were his exit fund. Money he'd been hiding for decades in case he ever got brave enough to run. He gave it to you because he knew you'd actually use it to build something real. Selena couldn't speak. The man who'd threatened to destroy her career, who'd manipulated situations to serve family interests, had given them his own escape fund, had made their running possible with money he'd saved for himself. He also said the FBI investigation was closed permanently, not suspended, closed. He'd spent the last 5 years of his life ensuring there was no evidence connecting us to any criminal operations, cleaned the records, paid off witnesses, made it impossible to build a case. Lucien pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is official documentation. We're clear. We could go home if we wanted. Selena took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were legal documents, FBI case closure paperwork, everything needed to prove Selena Vale and Lucien Moretti were no longer wanted for questioning. They could go home. They could reclaim their identities, their careers, their old lives. She looked around the Vancouver street where they stood, saw the coffee shop where they had breakfast every Saturday, the bookstore where Lucien spent hours browsing art history sections, the park where they walked Turner every evening. Do you want to go back? She asked. Lucien considered the question seriously. Part of me will always miss New York, miss the person I was trying to become before everything collapsed. But that person doesn't exist anymore. I'm not Lucien Moretti, crime family heir trying to redeem himself. I'm Michael Chen, art history professor who helps students discover what they love. And that's enough? It's more than enough. It's everything I was fighting for, a life defined by choices instead of inheritance. He cupped her face gently. What about you? Do you want to be Selena Vale again? She thought about her lab at the museum, about Marcus and Patricia and the colleagues she'd abandoned, about the career she'd built before it all imploded. Then she thought about Margaret trusting her with the Monet restoration, about students thanking Lucien for changing their perspectives, about Sarah Nakamura creating art inspired by their choice to return what was stolen. Selena Vale made one great choice in her life, she said slowly. She fell in love with someone trying to be better than his history. And then she became Sarah Chen, who makes that same choice every single day. So that's a no? That's a, I don't